Hello, and thank you for joining me today. We are live from the west coast of Canada, and today we're talking all about Campbelltown. Now, our topic today was inspired by our recent trip to Campbelltown when we visited Scotland just after visiting Islay. We went to Campbelltown, and I put together a top 10 Islay tips video after that, and people were asking for Campbelltown tips. And so I figured this was a great subject to go ahead and break down our recent trip to Campbelltown and our recent video with tips, trying to bring you more tips. So here we go. Let's start the show. Thank you, everyone, for joining me here today. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining the live. Let me know in the chat if you're here and if you're going to be dramming along with us today, what you're drinking. Now, before we go anywheres with this on a somewhat, uh, on a sad note and in a more serious tone, Headley Wright, basically Mr. Springbank himself, he passed away, I believe, last week at the age of 92. And he was the person who really guided Springbank and molded and shaped it into what it is today, keeping it independent, keeping the Campbelltown region a region with bringing back Glengyle, Kilkerran, and just a really important figure in Scotch whiskey in general. And so it was sad to hear that he had passed away, and really heartwarming to hear that he left Springbank and Glengyle in a trust for the people of Campbelltown. Profits from Campbelltown's Springbank and Glengyle distilleries are going to be put back into the town, into infrastructure projects, and just the distilleries are going to be employing people in the town for many years to come, and keeping Springbank independent. So with that, in Mr. Wright's honor, I think it's appropriate just to pour a glass of Springbank 10 here and raise one up to him. So thank you for all you did. On that note, let's get to our topic today, which is we're going to try and cover a bunch of ground here in regards to my trip visiting Campbelltown, going ahead and seeing the Springbank Distillery, Kilkerran, and others. And so we're going to be trying to cover a lot of ground here today. It's a little ambitious, but we'll see what we can do. In that regard, let me just check the chat here. Greg's whiskey guy, Gregoire, good to hear from you. Looks like you're checking in, finishing dinner here in Paris, pausing, in fact. That's kind of you to pause. Didn't know that news. I haven't met him, but Frank McCarty, yes, several times. Yeah, it's sad news, but I couldn't not mention it. It is obviously rather important and poignant. Whiskey and Wine Trails. Good afternoon, Matt. Sad news for sure. Yeah, exactly. And can't go wrong with Springbank 10. No, it feels like the appropriate dram to raise up in honor of Mr. Wright. So I'm going to bring up a slide here just to show you where I'm planning to go today. A quick, I guess, synopsis of what we're going to be covering. And that here is going to be just getting to Campbelltown, some first impressions. We're going to cover our distillery visits, Springbank shop. We're going to cover Cadenheads, as well as the soon-to-be expanding region of Campbelltown. So yeah, that's our plan for today. And again, let me know if you guys are online here. Let me know what you're dramming along with today. Also, at some point, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to be cracking some of the bottles I brought home with me from Campbelltown. I'll get you guys to vote in the chat what you'd actually like to see me open up here. A few more people checking in before we start right proper. Stephen Gibson, good afternoon, good evening from Fife. Oh, Fife checking in. Lovely. I've got to get my hands on some Daft Mill. Chaz Chili, my hero. Thanks for checking in, Chaz. Kartik, hi, man. Enjoying a coffee here in YYC. Yeah, sad to hear about Mr. Wright. Yeah, exactly. I've actually got my coffee here too. Let me take a sip of that. If it seems like we got people on either side of the Atlantic here. I'm here on the Pacific coast where it is 11 a.m. So it's a little early for whiskey, but we're making it work. It's just on the cusp of being appropriate. Yeah. So without further ado, let's get to our our first topic here, which is getting to Campbelltown. So we went to Campbelltown from basically Edinburgh. We actually took a bus taking us across the central belt to Glasgow. And from Glasgow, we took the 926 CityLink bus from the Buchanan Central bus station. Um, and that's the roundabout way we did it. We actually took that bus to the Kennencraig ferry terminal where we went across the Islay. We came back to that same ferry terminal, and then we continued on that same bus route down to Campbelltown. It worked fine. It's a long ride, but it's a beautiful, beautiful drive, and it was cheap. It was efficient. I know you can also get to Campbelltown by heading down to Androsson and then taking the ferry across. It just doesn't seem to run as frequently, and so this seemed to be the most flexible option for us to go along and get to Campbelltown. Now the bus, it actually drops you right at the harbor front. Basically, you're maybe 5-minute walk away from Springbank, at least with my long legs. Actually, our accommodation was right across from the Cadenheads shop, and as such, we were very close to where the bus dropped us off. So very convenient. We stayed at a flat that we booked off of Airbnb. Very reasonable price for accommodations. And again, right across the street from the Cadenhead shop, and just a few minutes walk from Springbank, and an 8-minute walk from Glen, Scotia. So really perfectly situated. And the way Campbelltown is really, it seemed like you could walk just about anywhere you wanted to go. It's not a large place. So a very walking friendly town. And so I really appreciated that. Now the city itself, everywhere we walked to, whether it was Springbank, Glengyle, Glen, Scotia, you see hallmarks of the town's history. You can instantly tell from the look of the buildings and just the stonework, the masonry. It's a city that has a past that actually has quite a bit of wealth behind it. But you can also tell by what it is looking like right now, which is just a little bit more rough around the edges, that it's gone through a downturn. Obviously, with the 1920s Pattison crash, when most of the Campbelltown distilleries closed, including Hazelburn, I believe, in like 1925. Um, it's gone through some rough times, downturn, and I do believe from what I've heard from people, it's actually it's coming back up in infrastructure spending, in projects, and just revitalizing the downtown area and the town itself. But you can see hallmarks of that glorious capital of whiskey in the world sort of past, and one of the wealthiest towns in the British Empire, um, to the downturn, and then starting to climb back up out of that again. So that's really cool. And that kind of adds to the charm of the town, the shades of the past, little echoes. And when we're talking about echoes of the past in Campbelltown, one of the things that really stunned me was just it is littered with former distilleries everywhere you go. It seems like there's an old, dismantled, torn down, or the hollow remains of another distillery. And one of the best demonstrations of this would be the Hazelburn Distillery. So actually, I should put up here some pictures. So this is Campbelltown. This is the hotel that also has the Black Swan pub, I believe it was. We had some food there, some great food. I had fish and chips. That was kind of my go-to in Scotland. This is the harbor as well on the left-hand picture, and the bottom picture there with the boats. It's a beautiful area. It's a really gorgeous, pretty little town. And again, for what I'm used to here in British Columbia, the buildings are quite something. Greg here saying a museum city then. Yeah, and much like Springbank too. Springbank's like an operational working museum, and so it kind of fits with the whole vibe of the town. And when we're talking about kind of like almost grave markers or tombstones of these former distilleries, one of the best examples again is Hazelburn. So I went and I sought out the site of one of the Hazelburn warehouses of old. So I believe that's the next slide here. Yeah. So this here is just at the end of Longrow Street. So it's just off of the street of Longrow. And this is the one of the former warehouses of Hazelburn. And you can see on the arch on the right hand side, it has the actual name etched. It's just like the former shades of it. Like you see it H A Z and so on, Hazelburn. And it seems to be just storing vehicles, like old vehicles, old car wrecks, or extra supplies for a company nearby. And it's really it is a sight to see when you're looking around, imagining where doors led, what different things on the roof were, what their purposes were. So yeah, it's interesting to go ahead and look and see that past represented. And it's very cool to see, obviously, what Springbank does in recognizing some of this past with their own triple distilled spirit, as I'm sure many of you are aware. Hazelburn 10-year-old here is a great one. It's one of my favorite later drams to be pouring. And I did a review of this. I really enjoyed it. This is a fresh crack on a new bottle. And this was named Hazelburn in tribute to that former Hazelburn distillery that closed in the 1920s. Greg, it's a good sign to see several projects of new distilleries seem to be seen in a good way of realization. Yeah, and I'm aware of two distilleries that are on their way, and I've got more details on those near the end of the stream here. Plan to give you there, but they seem to be in good hands too. The people who were planning those projects are not fly by night. And to get out of the three distilleries only threat, if one closes until now, the right to be a distillery per se, Campbeltown would be lost. That's why, yeah, exactly. That is exactly why they went ahead and opened Glengyle. That was Headley Wright's decision to go ahead and say, okay, if you're going to say we need three to be a region just like the Lowlands, well, we're just going to open up another distillery. So, I mean, that works. That put away the threat. And yeah, with a fourth and fifth opening, that would really seal the deal for them. Now, want to go ahead and mention here a tip. If you're going to Campbeltown for the first time, I want to suggest to you to dig into the history of these former distilleries. And that's something I wish I would have done a little bit better before visiting. I had some regrets as I was walking around town and realizing that building's probably a former distillery. So is that one. I'm not kidding, they're littered everywhere. There is a book by David Stirk that I tried to get a hard physical copy of. I could only download it. And it's about the history of Campbeltown's lost distilleries. So if you can get a hard copy of that book, I highly suggest it. I've heard nothing but good things about it and the material it covers. However, if need be, you can go ahead and download a ebook of it. I look at screens too much as it is, and so I didn't want to download an ebook because I like paper books. I'm old school in that way. So I didn't do that. But there's great information there. There's also an app you can download. I'm aware from the Campbeltown tourism, I think, that places them on a map and gives you some background on those closed distilleries. So yeah, definitely dig into the history so you can go ahead and enjoy that experience a little bit more. All right, first distillery visit. Let's get into that. So the first distillery visit, the first distillery tour was it had to be Springbank. It's all about Springbank. Is a great Facebook group if you want to fanboy out or fangirl out about Springbank. And that was kind of the play on words for the title here. Let's talk about Campbeltown whiskey. It's all about Campbeltown. So Springbank Distillery Tour. I feel like this Springbank doesn't really need an introduction. It's kind of on the tips of everyone's tongues these days. But it remains one of my favorite distilleries, even with all the hype, of course. I can't count that against the distillery. It was one of the very best tours I went on in Scotland. And I think that's because, one, it is like that working museum vibe that you kind of also get from Bruichladdich with such old machinery being employed. But also everything is hands-on. None of it seems to be automated. And on top of that, it just everything that goes into the whiskey making process is done at the Springbank Distillery. So because of that, you get to see every step if you visit Springbank. You're not going to see every step if you go to some of the other distilleries, especially, I mean, malting floors. I think there's only 8, maybe 9 distilleries in Scotland that have their own malting floors. You have that at the Springbank Distillery. So, bar none, one of the very best distillery tours that you can do. Now, if we're talking about that process, malting floor, there it is. There's yours truly picking up some of the barley that's malting there, and picking it up and checking it out. You can see the poles here on the malting floor. they're all painted different colors. And the quick among us here, as Kyla pointed out on our tour, all these poles here, they match the colors of the core range of whiskey. So the orange for the 10, you got the purple there for the 18, you got the 12 for the red for the 12 cast strength, green for the 15, gold for the 21. Yeah, so that's a nice little touch. That's a really cool touch. Let's see here, Stephen Gibson. It's all about Springbank. Yeah, I know. It's a perfect title. Let's see, Gregoire. I don't have that book, but I can recommend a book called Scotch Mist: Scotland's List Distilleries by Brian Townsend, reprinted in 2004. I'll check that out. I actually literally just went ahead and ordered a whiskey book, pre-ordered it. There's a release of 50 copies of Alfred Barnard's with the distilleries of the United Kingdom when he traveled around in the late 1800s, I believe the 1870s, to dozens of whiskey distilleries lost. So it's, yeah, I needed to have that book. I've been looking to get a copy. And again, I don't like to download ebooks. I want a physical hard copy in my hands. Awesome. Yeah, so I really loved checking out the malting floors. Next up, I believe we have the kiln. Now, the kiln is really fantastic because, again, not every whiskey distillery has its own kiln. A lot of places just get their, if they're using peated malt, they have it trucked in from elsewhere if they don't have their own malting floors. Now, with this one, they do use both wet and dry peat at Springbank. And part of that process is to get that, they use the wet peat, I believe, to get a lot more smoke. It's a slower burn, and again, produces more smoke, and that's where they want the phenols coming from. But they use the dry peat to start the fire too, and to keep the temperature up to where they want. So that's interesting. You can see here the different process listed on the sign for the different amount of time that they want to have the malt on being dried by the kiln. And so that includes, for Hazelburn, like this one right here, 30 hours of hot air, so no peat. Now, I imagine there's got to be some peat transfer from a kiln blowing hot air that usually pushes phenols. So that's really interesting to see there. So 30 hours hot air. Springbank, we got 6 hours of peat smoke, 30 hours of hot air. So kind of like a synthesis of the two methods. And then Longrow is going to give us up to 48 hours with the peat smoke. And there's a lot of so-called Springbank computers all around Springbank that go ahead and you can see when people have written times on for when they've turned the barley, when they've lit the fires, when they've stoked it. They track everything, it seems, by like chalkboards or whiteboards where they're writing the information down. Again, nothing seems to be automated, which is just fantastic. I love that about Springbank, doing everything old school, and everything's done just in a very practical way. Sandy McDonald checking in here. Evening, Matt, nipping in before my Indian food arrives. Oh, geez. Yeah, I could go for some Indian food for lunch, maybe after the stream. I'll follow your lead there, Sandy. Thanks for joining us. Stephen Gibson, definitely a goal from your bucket list tick, Matt. Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. It was a dream to get to Springbank, and I just can't stop talking about it. If you're not aware, guys, I gotta throw a shout out to Greg's YouTube channel too. I should have mentioned that right off the hop. Greg's Whiskey Guide, a fantastic YouTube channel. He's been writing and studying and enjoying whiskey for decades, and I always learn a lot from watching his videos. So check out that channel. And what reminded me of that is because we have John from Just Whiskey joining us. Cheers, John. Welcome here. Well, we're on the topic of the kiln. Looks like a question about the kiln. Matt, do you know if they used coal at some point? I believe they did, much like Yoichi does. Yeah, I believe they did. I'm not sure when they would have stopped doing that, though. I know they still use direct fired stills. However, I don't know when they switched over to gas to heat them. And then another comment here from Stephen Gibson. Love the old school style used at Springbank, used for so many years. No high tech innovation techniques, just some basic, plain and simple. Yeah, no, it's what it's about. I think that's one of the reasons why we find Springbank so charming. And on our tour, I'm just gonna hide this so I can show you guys. Um, the glass I'm using isn't a Glencairn right now. It's actually the Springbank glass that they handed us on our tour. I figured it was an apt time to go ahead and use that. And Springbank 10 just punches above its weight in the core range. I know a lot of people might dismiss it, might put it down just because it's kind of their entry level offering, but the Springbank 10 is just so good. I've been in blind tastings before where it has come out ahead of the 15 and the 18 certain batches. Of course, Springbank, you're embracing batch variation as you do with everything Springbank. So before we go ahead, I'm just going to take another sip of this Springbank 10. Thanks for everyone for joining. This is awesome. I'm glad to see you all here. It looks like we got 15 in the chat so far. So really appreciate you guys showing up. Thank you so much. Hmm. One thing I should mention is for live streams, guys, I want to make these a regular thing, like once a month or so. I do want some feedback. If you guys can let me know in the comments if you're catching this on a replay or if you are on right now, what time actually works best for you. I'll go through and I'll take notes and see if I can find something that works with everyone's times best. I figured 11 a.m. Pacific time would catch people on both sides of the Atlantic in an okay way. And I don't really want to be drinking before 11 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, let me know what time works for you guys. Let's see. I've got some. Greg says he has some Springbank coasters bought at Cadenheads, London, but still no branded glasses. You'll get there, Greg. I'm sure those are on their way soon. Frankie Hawkins, welcome here, Frankie. Hi, Matt. Good to see you live. My first live show with you. I'm a Springbank whiskey lover as well. Yeah, who, who isn't these days? I think we're all on board with the way Springbank goes about doing things. Jumping ahead here, Marcus. Welcome here, Marcus. Good evening, Matt, and all others from Austria. Where in Austria yet? I fell off an Alp in Austria once. So I have a very special connection to a place called Walmendinger Horn. Yeah, loved visiting Austria while I was living in Germany. So welcome here, Marcus. Wraith, hello back. All right. Let's keep moving on here. I could talk in the comments all day. Keep it up, guys. Love seeing that. So after the kiln, which I loved seeing the kiln, we checked out the malt bins and the the flour mill. So this is a traditional Porteous mill. You'll see them at distilleries all over Scotland, and every time you go to the distillery that where they have a Porteous mill, they will go ahead and tell you the same story about how there's one man, one individual that travels Scotland fixing these, and that they were so well built that they just simply didn't break down. No one ever really needed to replace them, and the company went out of business as a result. But there's one individual goes around maintaining them, and there was a lot of speculation, like, okay, all this knowledge of how to do this is just with this one person. What happens if something happens to them? And so he is training an apprentice now, which I'm not joking. Of the distilleries I visited, I think I heard this story 7 times. So yeah, you hear that one a lot. But that is the mill at Springbank that they use for going ahead and processing their flour. The flour, the husks, the proportions, they have them on signs there. I think it's like 10%, 20%, and 70%. 70% to the flour. I think it was 10% for the husks. So they have all the informational signs where for those commonly asked questions of the process, of what proportions they're doing, when their cut points are, all that stuff is littered around the building. It's such an informative tour, and they really have thought about what the whiskey nerd, what the whiskey geek is going to want to hear, and know. Checking out our comments here. We've got Stephen Gibson. We love Campbeltown whiskey and passionate about whiskey. That's why we marry here. Yes. Because for Millway, Springbank Town is just too damn expensive these days, and hand applied labels only get you so far. Yeah, the labels are. I mean, again, I find it a little bit charming that they're not fancy and not putting extra cost into that. But especially if you're in the United States, I think the importer, at least to the Western United States, has really taken an extra bit of cut. I've seen Springbank 10 regularly posted for around like $150 US. Not so in Canada. If I mean, you can't get it in Canada. It doesn't stay on shelves long enough to get it in Canada. But when you can, it's usually about $100 Canadian, maybe 110. So with conversion there, it's at like $80 American. And in the UK, I think it's still a reasonable price too. So yeah, it's sad to hear about the prices in the US when it comes to Springbank. Um, It's a lovely and well-made channel, real passionate person on board with luckily your other half to help. Yeah, so no reason not to watch. Thank you so much, Greg. And yeah, Kyla is such a big help. She's listening and checking in from the other room, making sure everything's going right with the chat. So yeah, couldn't do it without Kyla. Bob, hi Bob, how's it going? Welcome here. Um, Marcus, we get a discount here for the 10-year-old, about 50 euros a bottle, bought 7 bottles. You're not running out anytime soon. Wow. Um, yeah, yeah, no, it's so the prices in Europe at stores that aren't taking extra off the top are sound like they're reasonable too. 50 sounds like a good price to me. Right, I mostly see a happy man. Yeah. Kyla's commented quite a bit about how happy I looked while I was at Springbank. So that's undeniable. I was a very happy individual at Springbank. Moving on to the next slide here, we have their cast iron mash tun. Now I can't remember exactly how old they said this was, but it was impressively old. I think from like the 1920s. Just a fantastically impressive mash tun. I would have loved to see it working, but it's cool to be able to see everything that's there. On the right, you have their washback, so wood washback. So that's great for the bacteria growth that we want to see for washbacks when something's fermenting. So that's phenomenal. I can't remember if they're like Oregon pine, like larch, but wood nonetheless. Moving on to the next slide here, we have the stills. Again, another happy picture of me in the top corner there. We have Springbank stills and their whiskey safe. Now the stills are again just really impressive. I loved looking at the logbook. There's a logbook on the table that I decided not to share because I wasn't sure if it was appropriate for me to share their cut points, what times they're doing, all these other things, industry trade secrets, but really fascinating look at information from Springbank. And yeah, just enamored, frankly, enamored with the distillery. Stephen Gibson, very fortunate to pick up Springbank 21, 15, and 10 from the recent release. We attended Royal Mile Whiskey Festival and picked them. Uh, yeah, wow, you made out like a bandit if you got all 3 of those. I have yet to been able to actually purchase a bottle of the Springbank 21. So yeah, kudos, well done on that. Christopher in response, sure they're different, but can anyone honestly say that Springbank 10 drinks better than $50 Craig Gallagher 13? No. I mean, I love Craig Gallagher 13. I should probably put them blind into a lineup with 2 other whiskeys, maybe Ardent American AD and something else to really put it to the test. I do love Craig Gallagher 13, and I think I put that as my number 1 alternative to Springbank 10 in my 5 alternatives to Springbank 10 video. So I'm right there with you. It's as John from Just Whiskey said, a good way of putting it might be same church, different pew. I thought that was a good line, a good way to say it there, John. But yeah, I do have some hesitance with supporting Bacardi-owned distilleries at the moment, but that's for another time and another discussion. I won't jump into that. Let's see here. John, as I was just talking about, curious if you tried the older Springbank 13 green organic. No, I've never seen that in the flesh outside of the whiskey museum at the Springbank Bottle Shop, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So not familiar with that expression myself. You have that in your collection, John? Is that something you're going to be cracking soon? Frankie, hi Matt, and all your Springbank fans. Springbank is very expensive here and in New Mexico, but I still buy every time I see the bottle because it's rare to find a bottle. That's what we're kind of focused. That's what we have to do. Unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to Springbank, we don't like the price that's being charged, but just because of scarcity, sometimes you have to go ahead and pull the trigger, even though it's a little bit of over the odds. All right. So moving on these pictures here. So I'll add this back into the stream. We have some of the casks in the warehouse here. Now I only added pictures of the demonstration casks as well as some blurred barrelhead casks because again, a lot of the distilleries that you visit in Scotland, they I can't remember exactly which one said it's okay to post pictures. All of them say it's okay to take pictures, but not everyone wants the pictures posted. So I couldn't remember if Springbank was one of them. So we went ahead with the most discreet photos we could include here. But I think their warehouses are impressive. They're just impressive. We got some crazy cast types there. Talk a bit more about the wine casks that they're starting to use as well when we go to talk about Kilkerran, the Glengyle Distillery. But you can see here a small cask, a barrel, a hogshead, and a butt up here. Again, these are the demonstration casks that they had. So before we get there, we'll continue on here. Quickly check back into the comments before we move on to Glengyle. And I also have to talk about, well, everyone wants to know what you get to drink when you do a tour at Springbank. And so what they went ahead and they poured us was a measure of the Springbank 10, which you can take as a driver's dram. We did on this day. They serve it in this glass, as I mentioned earlier, which is great. But they do something that no other distillery did on our trip, which was they actually have a miniature bottle that they go ahead and that they issue for distillery visitors each year. So some of you might be familiar with these. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out the one I got from Springbank. I'll put this up to the camera here. And this is the Springbank focus. There we go. I now know Roy's pain with getting the camera to focus. Springbank private bottling for distillery visitors in 2023. Bottled at 46% ABV. This is a 10-year-old Springbank that is 100% ex-bourbon, which I was like, okay, I'm interested. I'm intrigued. So I haven't cracked this yet, but I'm waiting for the right opportunity. And today might be the day. I'll get you guys to help me vote because there is a similar thing with Kilkerran. And so once we get through the Glengyle Distillery, maybe we could take a vote in the chat for if you guys want me to open up the Springbank Private Bottling 2023 or the Kilkerran Private Bottling 2023 live on the stream to see what it's like. This one might be a good one because we have the Springbank 10 already poured to compare. So yeah, I'll place that to the side here while we go ahead and check up on these comments. I think that's just a really classy and wonderful thing to go ahead and do when you have distillery visitors. That's something you can take home with you. I mean, I didn't have to rush to finish it. I could bring it home back to Canada and enjoy it on my own time. And it's a memento. It's a keepsake. Again, well done, Springbank. Such a great job. Such a great job. Greg saying hi to Kyla. I'm sure she says hi back. Yeah, she just waved to me. Hi back. Bob was able to go ahead and pick up Springbank 12 cask strength this year. Well done. Those are rare as hen's teeth. I have only ever had 2 bottles of that, and one was the 100% ex bourbon batch, which I was very excited to get my greasy little mitts on. Let's see here. People discussing the comparison between Craigellachie 13 and the Springbank 10. Marcus, hard to compare 2 nice strands, but the funk is on the Springbank side. Yeah, I'd say there's a bit more funk, and then you get more of that like purpose sulfuric meatiness on the Craigellachie 13. So I'm right there with you. Craigellachie 13 versus Springbank 10 sounds like a nice challenge. Blind, stay tuned. Oh, okay. John's got some plans. He's working something up. All right. Let's see here. Oh wow, still got some unopened. Yeah, it wouldn't be a Springbank review without the elusive funk. Real talk here, guys. Sometimes I wonder if we're all overdoing it with the Springbank talk. you can get a little oversaturated talking about the same distiller that is on the tips of everyone's tongues right now. I know Roy's on his way to Springbank for a live this coming week. I know Eric Waite was recently there for the Springbank School. So it can be a bit much. But on that note, if you're heading to Springbank, two tips I really want to put out there for you are the fact that number one, if you're booking a tour at Springbank and you're wanting to pick up bottles, so official releases or cage bottlings from the Springbank store, be very careful what tour you book. And that's because we booked the early tour for Springbank and we got in line for the distillery shop. I think we were like sixth or seventh in line. And then I realized that our tour actually left from the Springbank shop 15 minutes before the shop opens. Yeah, crushing if you're hoping to get an elusive cage bottling and something with a bit more age. So know that if you're hoping to get some bottles, some rare bottles, or some of the releases the morning of, if you book that morning tour, you will either be missing your tour or you'll be pulling yourself out of line and returning to the shop after the tour. So be careful there. And maybe book the afternoon tour if you're worried about getting your hands on some bottles. The second thing is there's different types of tours you can do at Springbank, and we've had different channels highlight these recently. Leanne from Scotch on the Bayou, she went ahead and she did, I believe it's called the Barley to Bottle tour, where it's a really in-depth tour of the distillery. You see every process. I believe they serve you a lunch, and at the end, you get to blend your own bottle of Springbank to take home with you, which is just such a cool experience. Very jealous of that. It didn't work with our timing for our trip. Otherwise, I would have signed up for that. Absolutely. The other thing you could do is you can sign up for a 7-day, I believe, Springbank school where you actually work at the distillery. You are hands-on doing the physical, manual, hard labor, along with the employees, learning every inch of the job. And at the end, you write a test. It is a pass or fail test. And you also go ahead and work on blending your own bottle to bring home with you. Fantastic stuff. Now, unfortunately, with the Springbank School, because I looked into it as soon as I was there and saw it in operation, saw the students there with their orange safety vests. There is a 7-year wait to get into the Springbank School, and on top of that, they've actually closed applications. They're not taking any more names to go ahead and sign up for the Springbank School at this time. So that's sad. So if anyone has an open spot for the Springbank School that they are not able to use and is going to lapse, let me know. Maybe I'll jump on that. But yeah, very cool experiences you can have there at Springbank. Catching up a little bit more on the comments here. I might have already, yeah, with the elusive funk. I think I did touch on that one, Chris. Rare view of the spirit safes. Yeah. Yeah, the spirit safes are cool. I am way behind the comments here. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I like this show here too, Steven. Benroe 10 is a reasonable substitute. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Again, it's not the same, but it is very reminiscent. It definitely has its own unique type of funk. If I was going to compare it to something, I would compare it in the direction of a Campbeltown funk, but it is not the same. And Christopher Malloy wants to explain Campbeltown funk. For me, oftentimes Kilkerran, it can come off a little bit different, but for me, for Springbank, usually comes off as like a combination of like industrial machine shop, like oily rags sort of thing, but also almost like not a cheesiness, but maybe a overripe fruit sort of thing. And those two things paired together, which sounds ridiculous, but it's incredibly unique to me, and I really love it. Sorry if that's not a fulsome enough explanation of how I perceive Campbelltown funk, but I think that's the appropriate term is funk. Looks like Greg actually has the green, the 13-year-old, the organic. Awesome. Yeah, if I make it to Paris, I will. Well, of course, I'll be letting you know there, Gregoire. Uh, ooh, Still absolutely love the Springbank PX Sherry, the 10PX. I believe that was a 55% ABV release. Probably your favorite jam. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it as much as you do, but I'm glad you do. I'm really excited for their next release, which I'll probably talk about in an upcoming video. The Palo Cortado cask. I'm excited about that one. Um, Finally getting hopefully to caught up with you guys here, and we'll move on to the Glengyle Distillery. Not as many photos in that one, but we'll breeze through a bit quicker here as we're on to 40 minutes in. Steve, hand fills from the cage are so interesting. Yeah, they are, and I'll get you guys to help me crack one of those today as well. Spoilers. Let's see here. Funk didn't exist on some batches of Springbank 10 in my experience, especially in the early 2000s. Oh, interesting. Earliest batch of Springbank 10 I have is a 2015, and the funk is full force there. Interesting. Maybe that's a function of the malting floors they were using at that time, or maybe they had replaced their washbacks. It'd be interesting to see what would have caused that. Because there's a lot of speculation about what causes the funk, and I think it's a combination of factors. But I'd be looking at the malt they're using and the washbacks. The washbacks are a prime candidate in my mind. Let's see here. I think we're just about caught up. Bob, a friend retailer, sold the 12 cask strength to me after a chat, and I had bought the Hazelburn 12 Oloroso. Ooh, I don't have any of the special Hazelburn releases myself, so that is a lucky day. Well done grabbing that. I have some Long Row Red, but none of the special Hazelburns. I did see the 9-year-old Barolo cask in the past on a shelf, but they wanted about twice what it actually sold for originally. And on top of that, I just heard mixed reviews on that one, so I figured it's best not to go after that 9-year-old Barolo Hazelburn. And Kartik, I hope I'm saying that right. Pronunciation is always a little bit tricky for me. Ran into Eric at Bunnahabhain. Oh, Eric, wait. He said the school at Springbank has a long wait list, is definitely worth the cost, and gives you a great appreciation for how hard it is to make whiskey on the body. Yeah, I watched his live stream discussing it, and yeah, he he seemed a bit knackered by all the hard work they put in at the Springbank Distillery. So that is yeah, I would love to get on the list, but again, it's closed in 7 years. That's a long time. I have no idea where I will be in 7 years. So yeah, moving on to the Glengyle Distillery. Sorry, I keep some notes here, guys, to try and keep me on track, because otherwise I just keep talking to you guys all day and drinking whiskey. So let's look at the Glengyle Distillery here. Bring this back in. So here's a couple different looks at the outside of Glengyle. Here's a helpful reminder of where to go to find Glengyle Distillery. So Glengyle is the name of the distillery that was famously reopened in 2004 after 79 years of it being shuttered. And it came back, as we were discussing earlier, when the Scotch Whisky Association threatened to take Campbeltown's regional status away because they only had 2 distilleries. And they said, oh, you need a minimum of 3, like the Lowlands. And so again, Headley Wright, thank you once again for doing this, said, okay, well, I guess we'll open another distillery. And so that he did. And furthermore, the Glengyle Distillery, you might be wondering, it makes the Kilkerran whiskey. And actually, I'll pull out a bottle of Kilkerran. Here's the Kilkerran 12. You might be wondering why they call it Kilkerran and not Glengyle. And that's because the name Glengyle is actually owned by the Loch Lomond Group. They own the naming rights to that. I believe it was a blend that they were releasing under that namesake. And so while it is the Glengyle Distillery reopened, they can't sell it as Glengyle whiskey. And so they named it after St. Kieran. Basically, the name Kilkerran comes from the Scottish Gaelic. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but I'll try it for comedic effect. Cian Loch Kilkerran, the head of the lake at St. Carrick's Cell. That's where the name for an early settlement that predated Campbeltown came from. It was St. Kieran, I believe, is the name of the settlement. So that's how we get Kilkerran from Glengyle. Now, you still meet at the Springbank shop to start your tour, and you walk to the exact opposite side of the grounds for the Glengyle Distillery tour. Now, one of the things you'll want to keep in mind when you go ahead and take the tour, you're thinking about looking at booking tours, sorry, is that um, only 3 months of the year is the Glengyle Distillery running. The other 9 months, it actually sits silent. And it runs when the Springbank Distillery is down for repairs, is in its own quiet season. And so if you're visiting and you want to see the Glengyle Distillery in operation, you have to time that well. You might want to contact the distillery to find out when it is actually running as opposed to sitting silent. It's run by staff from Springbank. Basically, the whole crew just moves over, shifts over to Glengyle and runs things over there. So when you're going, think about if it's in your control, whether you want to be going when Springbank is operational to see that process in motion, or when Glengyle is operation to see that one. Now, the first thing we did on our distillery tour is actually stick our noses into some casks that were sitting out in the yard. And so that's these casks right here. And so we removed the bungs on these casks and we actually just stuck our noses inside, which was a great experience. I hadn't done that yet. And so these were all different wine casks that were sitting, conditioning, and getting set up for filling. And so we opened up some Reeve Salt casks, which is a French fortified wine, if I'm not mistaken. We opened up some Syrah casks, some red wine casks, and also some Amontillado casks, which I have a new love affair with Amontillado sherry cask whiskeys. Let me tell you, so that was a fantastic experience. I loved that. Checking out the comments here. Let's see. We can't get our hands on. Greg says we can't get our hands yet on those special new 12-year-olds, unfortunately. But the Palo Cortado, I'd really like to try. Yeah, me too. That is one I'm already feeling a little bit of FOMO over. I didn't really get that need to hunt down a bottle, the Springbank PX, but this Palo Cortado, from what I'm hearing from people who've had early samples, is really quite something. So yeah, I guess I'm adding to the hype there. I have an open bottle of one like that. One of the two reviewed in the Springbank 10-year-old 4x videos. Okay, I'll have to dig into the back catalog there, Greg. Very kind, bang on pronunciation. Okay, I'll take it. Comment about that 9-year-old Hazelburn. Both the Springbank and the Hazelburn, while both are good, the Springbank 9 is way better. Okay. Yeah, I found on a bar out here in near Vancouver, possibly the weirdest Springbank product I've ever tried, which is a long row from a Tokai cask. It's a single cask long row Tokai cask maturation, and it's weird. I'm gonna try and do a review with the sample I have that I took home with me in the future here. But yeah, it was strange, but always experimenting, which is great. Um, let's see here, Stephen. One thing we must add is how widely available Kilkerran bottles are in Scotland at present from all good liquor shops. Really great to hear that, because there was a time when Kilkerran 12 was a bit harder to get your hands on in Scotland, from what I've heard. Roy Duff, Aquavite, shout out to Roy. From what I heard him say over kind of like the pandemic years of 2020 to 2022. Yeah, so glad to hear it's sticking on shelves a bit longer. I have some thoughts on Kilkerran availability from the Springbank shop too. I'll cover when we get to the Springbank shop. Um, Travis Morta, new subscriber. Hey, welcome here, Travis. Thanks for subscribing. And fellow PNW or Seattle. Okay, all right. Pacific Northwest representing. Thanks for all the great content. Haven't opened Hazelburn 15 Oloroso. That has an incredible nose. Let me know if you ever want to come down for a sample. Thank you for the kind offer. I do venture down to Seattle for things like for Mariners games when the Blue Jays come to town, or sometimes just for the Mariners, or to go see the Whitecaps play the Sounders. So that might be something we'll have to, maybe one day we'll have to meet up. Let's see here. Smeargel, hello from Finland. Hey, welcome here. Man, I love the Finns, Finnish hockey players. Anyways, we've had some great Finnish hockey players on the Vancouver Canucks in the past, which are just really entertaining people and great people. So welcome here. Thank you so much for joining us. They're expanding their wine cask policy. Not sure I'm reassured, but if they work well with it, yeah. Yeah, no, there is a lot of wine casks in the yard at Springbank when I visited. Overwhelmingly wine casks. I saw more rum casks at Springbank. Um, they're experimenting, and I'm all for experimentation, but you want to make sure, yeah, you're using good quality casks that haven't gone off, that aren't going to go, um, sulfured or overly acidic, out of balance. And thanks for the pronunciation feedback there, Greg. Uh, Yeah, and last comment before we move on. Stephen Gibson, you can pick up the 12-year-old and 8-year-old sherry and bourbon, and the 16 more difficult, but still available. Yeah, that's echoing what I found when I was in Scotland and in Campbeltown as well, Stephen, which again is great to see. Where I am, I have never owned a bottle of the Kilkerran 8-year-old. Not one, not the bourbon, not the sherry, not the port, because they sell immediately here in Canada. And also they got so much hype after that sherry blew up. The 8-year-old sherry blew up back, I think it was the 2020. That one just people went bonkers for. And ever since, they've been on secondary for like $250 Canadian, sometimes a little bit more. I figured I'll wait till one lands in my lap by some magical means. I'm not going to pay over the odds for that. All right, jumping back to the pictures here. We moving past the cast. This is a mill that was donated to the Glengyle Distillery when they were setting up back in 2004. Now, something that I was struck by is that the Glengyle Distillery really seems like it's a bit like Frankenstein's monster. It's put together from spare parts from other distilleries from all over Scotland. Bits from here, bits from there. Put them all together. Put some electricity in it and see if it comes back to life. Seemed to be the policy. And so with this mill, it's a Bobby mill. It's not a Porteous mill, but it was given to them free by the aforementioned Craigellachie Distillery. So Craigellachie coming into conversation a few times here. And our guide told us that it was given free to the distillery, and that's what the website reads as well for Glengyle. But he mentioned that there was some talk of payment for it to make sure that they never wanted to call it back into service if Craigellachie's own mill broke down. So they may have found some arrangements to help pay or some token of appreciation to Craigellachie for that generous donation of a Bobby mill. So that's the mill at Glengyle. Another thing that they took from an old distillery was the stills and condensers. So these stills were actually taken from a closed, dismantled, demolished distillery, Ben Wyvis. So we were hearing about Glen Wyvis, a new distillery, but we're talking about Ben Wyvis, which is a distillery that didn't operate for very long. I believe it was owned by Inver Gordon back in the day, and it closed in 1977 and was demolished to make way for a housing development. And so these stills, I couldn't find it on Google to try and fact check my memory. And when you go to Scotland, I highly suggest taking notes. I didn't. I should have took notes as to what stuck in my mind after each distillery tour. I didn't. But what I think I remember hearing about these stills is they were too tall for the roof on the distillery, and so they actually had to cut them down. It was either the stills proper or the line arm. So I believe there is a right at the bottom of the neck, just above the top of the middle of the still. You can see some areas where they actually had to do some welds. That's my recollection. Um, if I am wrong on that, I apologize, but that's my understanding. Either way, these stills were taken; they were harvested, if you will, an organ transplant from the Ben Wyvis distillery. Now they had to be reshaped quite a bit. They had to do a lot of work to make them fit their own specifications, the spirit and wash still. Um, but they've made them work, and work they have. Kilkerran is a lovely, lovely whiskey. I've really enjoyed it so far. Now, most of the I'll remove this for a moment. Most of the malt is provided by the Springbank floor maltings. All the malt for like the Kilkerran 12, Kilkerran 8, these sorts of whiskeys, the Kilkerran 16, they're all provided from the Springbank maltings, as you would expect. That's kind of the MO, the modus operandi of Springbank. However, I was surprised to hear from our tour guide that the malt for this release isn't. And again, I sorry if I'm wrong, but he told us that The malted barley for this Kilkerran heavily peated release is actually it's ordered in. It's still Scottish barley and all that, but the heavily peated, which is extremely heavily peated barley, they don't floor malt it themselves, which is the only departure I know of for Springbank's operations where they don't do it themselves. So that was really interesting to hear. So the barley apparently sourced from elsewhere. I should have asked if that was Baird's, if that was Crisps or others. But again, it's a tour with a whole bunch of other people. You don't want to kind of monopolize their time. Let's check in on these comments again. All right, Travis. I'm actually a Portland transplant, so despise the Sounders. Okay, PTFC, I see, has probably got your heart, eh? Happy to hit up a Sounders v Whitecaps match and cheer against the Flounders. Oh man. Aquavite Barfly, Jerry's a big Sounders fan. That I think I'm gonna have a chance to meet next week. He's I think there's possibly wedding photos with Sounders kit on, so that would be too much fun to cheer against the Sounders and Gorilla FC, all that. We could get a good little whiskey on the West Coast rivalry squad there. Greg, the Hazelburn 15 was amazing. The 2022 last couldn't buy it, like almost everything else from Springbank. They're usually sold out before the end of the show, where we can try them. Yeah, it feels like you kind of have to try before you buy, which is a risk and not something that I'm sure I'll keep doing much longer with the state of economy and finances the way it is. Travis, you got to open Kilkerry 8 Sherry as well. Good stuff. I did try that at shout out to the Tipsy Midgie in Edinburgh. Great whiskey bar right beside Hollywood Distillery. And Colin, I think, is the operator. Colin does a great job. Really welcoming, really fun guy too. He's a good to give a ribbing to, and really fair prices for pours too. So I actually ordered a glass of Kilkerran 8 Sherry cask. It was my first time having it at the Tipsy Mingy. It was great. I definitely would like to have a bottle. Um, so yeah, glad you have one there, Travis. Let's see. Let's head back to Finland. I already have a bottle of Springbank 15, which I really like, and saw the shop in the EU selling Springbank 15 for 145 euros, which seemed pretty low compared, but they're usually going for around 200 euros. It's 200 euros now, eh? My last bottle of Springbank 15 I picked up for, I believe, $130 Canadian. And it's going up here too, but I think it's usually in and around the like 135 to 150 mark here in Canada. But I mean, again, not available. You have to get it within the first 10 seconds it's released online, or else you're out of luck. So yeah, interesting. And following up on that, I really want to try the Hazelburn 15 Oloroso next, but those are around 200 euro range in EU stores. There might be an interesting way to try something similar to that, and that might be looking for the 2023 Hazelburn Open release, which is a 14-year-old Oloroso sherry cask and comes in a half bottle. And I think those on secondary, even auction, are actually, I think they're around 40 pounds, which is what they about 5 pounds more what they were at the distillery. So maybe check for that 2023 open day release, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about the Springbank shop. Uh, and catching up here. That new Springbank 15-year-old, which I ordered, is 2023 release. I have found that if you were looking for that like absolute like slathered in sherry sort of Springbank 15, I know from experience the 2022 I had last year was unreal. And same with the one I had earlier this year, which it didn't come with a batch number on it, so I can't say that it was for sure the 2023. But my sneaking suspicion from the out term was it was either the late 22 or an early 23 release. So yeah, lately they've been extremely sherried, extremely sherried. Okay, heading back to Glengyle, you should likely recognize this photo here. This is off of the emblem on the Kilkerran bottle. And so that's the view of the steeple of the Springbank Church. And you'll find it front and center on bottles of Kilkerran single malt whiskey. Now they might need to do some weed whacking or some trimming to be able to see the church steeple. You can only just see just the tip, just the tip. Yeah, I said that. All right, but you can only see just the top of the church steeple there. But still, really cool to be able to see that shot, and that's right at the back of the distillery. So that was really cool to see. Now, I'm gonna take that out. So as I mentioned earlier, when you're doing this, you get a pour with your tour. You get a glass. I'll pull down the Kilkerran glass. Looks like that. Just a little Kilkerran logo there. Don't know how well that showed up. Um, you get a pour of the Kilkerran 12 or a driver's dram if you're driving, and then you also go ahead and receive a miniature of a private bottling for 2023 distillery visitors, just like the Springbank one, which looks something like that there. So this, much like the Springbank one, is pardon me, is a 12-year-old. So it's Kilkerran 12-year-old, but it's 100% ex bourbon. So both of these, Springbank 10-year-old, 100% ex bourbon, Kilkerran 12-year-old, 100% ex bourbon, 46%. So if you guys want to let me know in the chat, if we want to open up one of these private bottlings, let me know which one you'd actually like me to go ahead and crack and pour here. Now, next up, while we're waiting to hear if you guys want me to open up one of those, we're going to be talking about the Springbank shop, and we're going to be talking about my tips with the Springbank shop. Which again, one of them is definitely make sure that if you have the early tour, don't expect to be able to get into the Springbank shop early. And we're going to talk about the washback bar, which is a great spot to go and drink some Springbank while you're there. Let's see here. Stephen Gibson, I was lucky to try the Hazelburn 14 Campbeltown Festival Oloroso 20 centiliter bottle and Bruichladdich release. So delicious. Yeah, I really enjoyed that Hazelburn 14. I brought home a bottle of that Bruichladdich. Now the open day releases for Springbank, at least the Hazelburn and the Longrow, were actually 375s, I believe. I'll check that in a moment. And yeah, the Cadenheads one was 200 mil. I believe the Springbank 24 that they released might have been 200 as well. Greg, did you notice batch variations on your side, Matt, about the Kilkerran 12? I noticed batch variations when they, I mean, it might be in my head, but I believe I noticed batch variations when we moved from the tall, slender bottle here to the new, like the Springbank style bottle, the more squatter, shorter bottle with the Springbank lettering on it. I did notice some batch variation there. I did prefer the old style bottling. I felt like there was more peat influence on the newer ones. And I just really love the very subtle character of the tall, slender bottle. But I also don't have a bottle of each cracked right now to compare the two. That would be the best way to do it. But my notions of trying Kilkerran 12s since then were that they were different, and that to my preference, I preferred the older, slender bottle. Let's see here. Greg's voting for the Springbank private bottling. John's going Kilkerran 12 bourbon. Danny Marshall wants to Kilkerran. Okay, so 2-1 Kilkerran right now. Smear Gel, have you tried any Highland Park cast strength releases? I have liked the number 2 and 3. Also, the number 4 recently got released, which I'm planning to get. So interesting things about the those cast strength releases. Highland Park batch 2 and batch 3 I did try. I actually was quite impressed by them. They drank very hot initially, but tossed some water into it over time, and really great, lovely drinkers once you bring them down. However, if you're even with water, they still drank a wee bit hot. I have a bottle of the batch 1 unopened yet. I've got far too many bottles open right now. I'm trying not to tear into all of them, but I do have a bottle of that original release. So next time I get a sample of a more contemporary release, I might do a side by side of the batch one and whatever batch that is, but I've had batch two and three. I enjoyed both. I didn't pick up bottles of them. I didn't feel I needed to with an unopened batch one at home. I don't need to collect them all. It's not Pokemon or anything. But I do like trying all the batches to see how they're progressing. And yeah, well worth if at a good price, well worth picking up. Greg's yeah, you got the old bottle too of the Kilkerran 12, the taller one. Yeah. All right, let me go ahead and crack this Kilkerran private bottling. This will be actually I got the glass right here. This will be actually the first of the whiskeys that I brought home from Scotland with me to be cracked. I've been trying to take it slow after quite a bit of whiskey adventuring in Scotland. Everything in moderation and in balance. All right, it is cracked. Kilkerran private bottling for distillery visitors 2023. 12 years old, 100% ex bourbon. Let that sit for a moment. I'll grab a second glass here to go ahead and put a little bit of this standard Kilkerran batch into as well. Frankie, hi Matt, looking to trade for a bottle of Kilkerran 8-year-old cask strength. I will trade for it. Okay. So if someone's in New Mexico is looking to trade for the Kilkerran, talk to Frankie. That's one of the great things about the whiskey community. Like everyone's always trying to like help facilitate trades, help people get samples. I really just love that about this community. It's really just a great bunch of people, and you're all just so fantastic. Thank you once again for joining me here today. It's been fun so far. Hopefully we keep having some fun. All right. So I think what I'll do here is actually wait for that standard pour of Kilkerran 12 to settle a little bit for the nose, and I'll go ahead and come back to the new private bottling to give some reflections on the differences. Now, we'll continue our topic here, not to waste too much more time, and jump into the Springbank shop. Now, these are some pictures from the Springbank shop, which I was in my glory at the Springbank shop. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to line up for the store in the morning, don't book that early tour. You book that early tour, you will be coming back to the shop later on when the lineup is gone, and most likely all the Springbank is too. Now, I will say I didn't get to the shop early on either of the days I visited. I visited in the middle of the afternoon, and honestly, I still got some great bottles. So I don't feel the sense of FOMO going to the Springbank shop. I don't feel a need to get there first in line. I think the days I was there, it was the same two individuals that were first in line each day. I think they'd been doing that a number of days. Um, I don't feel the need to play that game. What I get is what I get, and I had plenty of great whiskey coming back to Canada from Scotland, and so for that reason, I was fine with it. But if you are a little nervous, a little anxious about what you might get, don't book your tour in the morning. Now, what was available there? As we were talking about the availability of Kilkerran, and that right picture there, it might be hard to see, but they had basically the full range of Kilkerran on the shelves. They had the 12, they had the 16, they had the heavily peated, they had both the bourbon and the sherry cask, 8-year-old cask strength on the shelf, and multiple backups of everything there. What they did not have is they had absolutely no core range Springbank bottles. No 10, no 12, no 15, 18, 21, needless to say. Nothing, nada. They did not have the open day Springbank release. They had nothing Springbank available. They did have Hazelburn 10. They had the Long Row. They had Campbeltown Lock, which is a great bottle. I really enjoyed that in the sample I had recently. But again, no Springbank. Except what they did have was they had these on the left-hand side here, cage bottlings. And they had cage bottlings of Hazelburn. They had cage bottlings of Long Row. But they also had cage bottlings of Springbank. That was the only Springbank that you could get, was Springbank cage bottles, which I was a-okay with. That's kind of what I wanted. So, how a cage bottling works, if you're not aware or not familiar with it, is they are single cask bottlings of Springbank that are locked away in the distillery shop. Now, they only open one box at a time. So basically, once the wall gets down to its last bottle, once that last bottle sells, they'll stock the cage bottling wall with a new box. And so each box is pre-selected to have bottles of various age, cask type, and of distillate types. So between the three of Long Row, Hazelburn, and Springbank. Now, what's on the shelf is what is available. You can't ask them to go into the next box and find something better for you. It is what it is, and the luck of the draw is the luck that you have. That is the hand that you're dealt. And you can only purchase one bottle per week. You have to sign a book, a log, saying that you're purchasing the bottle, and you have to go ahead and they write your name on the label of the bottling. So on my first visit to Springbank, I went ahead and I picked up a cage bottle, and that was actually ahead of my Cadenheads warehouse tasting. I got there in the afternoon. We just arrived in Campbeltown, probably within the hour. Kyla was resting and just having some relaxation time at the flat. I went for my Cadenheads warehouse tasting, and when I got there, I immediately purchased a Springbank 11-year-old fresh sherry cage bottling. I believe that was about 55 pounds for that. It's just a great price for a single cask bottling, official bottling, let's say, of Springbank. I was enamored with that. I was just, yeah, I was really happy. I wasn't expecting there to be any cage bottlings, so I was really, really excited. The cage bottlings do fluctuate in price depending on the age. I believe 11 years and younger is 55 or 65 pounds, around that. Then 12 years old to 15 or 16, I believe, is the next step up. It's like 75 pounds or so. And then 85 or 90 pounds is anything older than that. Which again, those all seem like very fair prices to me. Now, the next day when we visited Springbank together for the tour, Kyla went ahead and she purchased a Springbank cage bottling as well. That said, and she didn't buy a Springbank. She actually got a 14-year-old Hazelburn fresh berry release. And actually, I'll show you that one here. So we had tremendous luck. We had tremendous luck with our cage bottlings and with the bottles we were able to get. So I'll show you Kyla's bottle. So this is the Hazelburn. Oh, sorry. Fresh sherry, 14-year-old. Now, I've got this tape here just because of internet reasons. You can't be too careful with identity stuff online. But this is Kyla's bottle. You can see her name on it, and that is her cage bottling. So maybe I'll have to ask her permission to crack this one open. This was bottled on 4/20/2023, so April 20th, 2023. Got this little hang tag with the bottling date on it. Very cool. Actually, it has the price on the back here. So I was just a bit off. You can see on the back. Let's see here. You might be able to read that. It says Hazelburn duty paid sample, 12 to 15 years old. So that's the price bracket there. So 12 to 15, 75 pounds. Again, yeah, I'd pay that all day for a 14-year-old Hazelburn fresh sherry. It doesn't say the type of sherry. It doesn't seem like they go ahead and distinguish between the two. So we don't know if it's Old Roast, if it's PX, Amontillado, don't know. Very cool. Now, I would show you my Springbank cage bottling, but I've got a story about that one that I'll let you in on in a little bit here. And then we'll go ahead and we'll decide which of these cage bottlings we want to crack open here today as well. I'm just going to catch up on some of these comments while we check out these Kilkerran pours here as well. Frankie, yeah, we already went about that one. Looking to trade for an 8-year-old. No, thank you. Excellent content. Thanks, Steven. I really appreciate that. They also had how was the Cadenhead shop in Campbeltown? I heard mixed reviews this year regarding inventory levels. Edinburgh was good with the exception of Springbank Kilkerran and, yeah. Strange. Okay. I'll cover Cadenheads a little bit in a bit here. I didn't spend much time there. I will say that, yeah, the availability of interesting bottles wasn't exactly what I was looking for. The demijohn bottlings were good. I tried a few of those. I was tempted by those. I was tempted by some old Canadian corn whiskeys there. There's a 32-year-old Potter's corn whiskey from Kelowna, British Columbia that was available. I was a little bit tempted by that. But yeah, it wasn't as compelling as the Springbank shop, let's say. So nosing the old tall bottle of Kilkerran 12 here. It's that like delicious, bright, clean, with that like little touch of peat, some citrus, malt forward, beautiful nose on it. Classic Kilkerran profile for me for what I enjoy from Kilkerran. Take a sip. Mm. Oh yeah. Oh, that's just a delicious whiskey, Kilkerran 12. That especially once it opens up, like you crack it, get a few pours in it. I wasn't so compelled with it when I first tried Kilkerran 12, and then given about a month sitting there, it just opened up. Just a perfect peating level on the finish there. Like vanilla butterscotch is on the palate, along with those lighter fruits like a bit of like a lemon zest, some butterscotch or toffee, but very malt forward, very clean, very just classic whiskey profile. Nothing mucking about, no sherry getting in the way of tasting the distillate. Really just quite lovely. This is entirely different. Okay. Oh man. Okay. Hold the phone. That is like coconut and lemon, like meringue cream pie made a baby and put this whiskey in my glass. The private bottling. Oh yeah, and lime too. Okay, so citrus fruits are amped up incredibly. There's coconut, like coconut shavings, but there's those dessert tones too, those like fresh baking goods. So it's a coconut cream pie with like lemon zest shaved on top and like a lime wedge on the side to drizzle on top. Like that's wild. That's wildly different than 100% ex bourbon. Taking a sip of this. Sláinte, guys. Oh wow, much heavier on the peat on the finish here. I'll have to take another sip to get the palate proper. Much heavier peat on the finish than the regular 12. But the nose stunned with how different it was. Mm. Such a clean, um, such a clean profile. Great texture on it. Great mouthfeel. Um, I wouldn't say it's waxy or anything along those lines, but it's definitely full body there. I think a drop of water might really open that up. Oh wow, nothing dark in that. It's all bright. It's all again like vanillas and dessert tones with that fruit, that citrus fruit, just like amping it up, blasting it up. And then the finish, the peat is just dominating on the finish for me. And then it goes into some lovely like malt cereal tones here too on the finish. That's that is so different. I would love to see Kilkerran play around more with its with its cask makeup on the 12-year-old. Really lean into that batch variation we love from Springbank. I'm gonna set this to the side, and I'll keep getting to know this private bottling 2023 Kilkerran ex bourbon cask. That's phenomenal. We covered how much cage bottlings cost. Joel, hey Joel, welcome here. The man who gave me my first taste of Springbank. Yeah, I met Joel through a friend recently. Had him over to my house here, and we poured. What did we pour that night? We poured Springbank 10. I think we poured the Springbank 15. We poured Octomore 9.1. We had a good time. It was fun hanging out with you, Joel. We'll have to do that again sometime soon. You live nice and close by, so that really helps. And seeing some of the whiskeys you've picked up on your purchases recently. Yeah, you're doing great. Sorry to hear that you didn't quite get along with that your first taste there of Orchard House. Um, that's a whiskey that really leans into that young, bright, floral and fruity ex bourbon profile with I believe it's tannic and Kleinleach that are providing a lot of that there. Hopefully, it improves as it opens up for you there. If not, I could always find a way to take that bottle off your hands. Daniel Marshall looks delicious. Yeah, it really was. Sorry, Matt, missed the 2 minutes trying to give you a super chat. Oh, thanks, Greg. That's really kind. Having issues, update bank info. Hopefully another time it'll work. Hey, no worries, Greg. Anything like that is an extra kindness. So no need for apologies there. Stephen Gibson, you have just described a Daft Mill single cask. I have had a couple Daft Mill single casks, and for me, they profiled a lot like the old brown label Deanston 18, the ones I tried, the Kensington Wine Market Daft Mill single cask. Hopefully, I can bring you guys some Daft Mill content on the channel soon. I have so many ideas and so many different directions to go with it, and work's just been busy. So, but hopefully, we get some more coming your way, guys. Greg, interesting. That sounds close to old 2000 Springbank 10 I was talking about. The bourbon and rum batches only, the bourbon only, and they're mostly unpeated. Oh, wow. That's interesting. This is what I love about whiskey. There's such a world to explore with whiskey. There's so many different directions you can go with it. That's really interesting. And the only Daft Mill that Gregoire's tried so far, 2006 very small batch, was like heaven to me. Unbelievable quality. So looking forward to discover more. Yeah, I really enjoyed what I've had from Daft Mill so far. I did try a sample of the 15-year-old cast strength and wasn't in love with that release. So I'm not gonna, unless you have extra cash burning a hole in your pocket, I'm not going to suggest you spring for the 15-year-old cast strength unless you've had a sample and you enjoy it. But the single casts and the small batch releases, I haven't had one I don't enjoy yet. Yeah, really wonderful profile. The cask, the way that I think it's Francis Cuthbert picks casks for Daft Mill is that I believe he gets in his tractor. He literally just drives over to the coopers, and when they get casks in, he goes through and he hand selects each of the casks that he wants from them. So he is actually just taking like the pick of the litter at the cooperage and brings them back and just fills those casks. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Yeah, so I'm not surprised that they have such great quality with every step of the process there. Joel, yeah, you're confirming the Springbank 10, the 15, the Octomore 9.1. That was great to sip outside on the balcony. Yeah. No, good times. Um, Greg, Greg's Whiskey Guide. My buddies were so lucky with every release. Francis Cuthbert put on a show at the Fife Whiskey Festival. I mean, it's his home turf. He has to put on a show at Fife, right? Almost the entire range was showcased and sampled. That is an unreal experience to have. I'm glad you got to have that. And then Smeardill, perhaps Matt should try a Finnish whiskey sometime. You know, I might have a sample of a Finnish whiskey. The only Finnish whiskeys that I believe I've seen Danish whiskeys in BC and British Columbia here. It's a long way for them to travel. I believe there are some Finnish whiskeys. Terranpeli? Eh, I'm just gonna stop guessing right now. Available through the Boutique Whiskey Company, an independent bottler that does 500 mil bottlings. So maybe I should try and find a Finnish whiskey, do some world whiskey tastings and reviews. Okay, so back to the Springbank shop and the cage bottlings. One of the things that I should probably cover here actually is going back here. I think that the hero that saves the day for the Springbank shop is the picture right in the middle here. And you've probably heard about them if you've followed other people's visits to Springbank. The demijohns. The demijohns are going to save your day if you're arriving late in the afternoon. There's no cage bottlings left. There's no Springbank left. The demijohns are basically like living casks that they're constantly topping up in the Springbank shop that you can go ahead. You can taste them before you buy them. So you can have a little sample poured straight from the demijohns of either Springbank, Longrow, Hazelburn, or Kilkerran. And you can fill your own bottle. You could fill a 200 ml bottle. You can bottle a 700 ml bottle, but you can fill your own bottle of these Springbank demijohns, and they're really reasonably priced. I'm just going to check my notes here on the pricing, but I believe they're, yeah, 55 pounds for a 700 ml bottle and 20 pounds for a 200 ml bottle. Super reasonable. The one thing you won't know is what went into it. You don't know the ages on it. You won't know the cast types, which is why it's so important just to go ahead and try each of them and see what works for your palate. For me, these living casts essentially, with their ABVs constantly changing and cast makeup constantly changing, um, I really have a lot of regret not bringing back that remarkably dark long row, second from the left in those demijohns. And I kind of assumed that it might be a bit sulfuric from wine casks. It might be a little bit acidic, might be out of balance. But that was a flavor bomb. That was an unbelievable demijohn, and I was sweating bullets because of how many bottles we already had, and how much we are and not allowed to bring back to Canada. So I didn't leave even with a 200 ml bottle of the demijohns, but that's a big regret for me not grabbing that long row because it was a stunner. It was a stunner, and I've seen others who actually visited the day after me at the Springbank Distillery that picked that up, and they can't say enough good things about that long row demijohn. So you win some, you lose some. I'm happy with what I came back with. But those demijohns, they're there to save your day if you're getting there a little too late. Yeah. They also had in the shop some open day releases still in stock, which I was surprised by. I thought they'd be gone. I thought they'd be long gone. But I'll take the pictures down for a moment and I'll show you the aforementioned 350 centiliters, 350 milliliters, 35 centiliter um, Hazelburn open day release, 14-year-old Oloroso sherry. It's 49.8% alcohol. It's one of 2,000 bottles. I guess bottling it, if they put it in full bottles, they would have only had 1,000 bottles. I'm really glad that they did because it meant I had a chance to actually go ahead and get a bottle. So we were talking about that Hazelburn 15 Oloroso earlier. If you can't find that, I did check auction prices on this, and I believe they were going for about 40 pounds, which at the distillery, I think this was 35 pounds. So yeah, that might be worth a try there. And if we're talking about these, place that there for now. This is very full table. I was also able to pick up this long row Oloroso sherry cask, 8-year-old open day release 2023, 54.9%, one of 2,000 bottles. And I actually tried these before purchasing them to see if I actually enjoyed them. And they were both worth the purchase, as you can tell by me bringing them home. Really appreciated them. And I believe that one was 30 pounds. So again, really reasonable prices on those. Really excited to crack those open. But as I mentioned earlier, I had so much whiskey on my trip to Scotland, I had to take a break for the sake of my own health. You gotta have some moderation eventually. Let's check these comments here, and I'll get to the sad tale of a cage bottling that did not come home with me. Anthony, welcome here, Anthony. I'm not sure if you checked in earlier, but either way, I want to make sure I say hi. I'm hoarding bottles of Springbank 10 and 15 in the UK. If I am lucky, I can get 3 to 4 bottles a year. Okay, as long as you're still enjoying them, like definitely want to make sure you have a backup plan. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of whiskey on the market soon, and I'm a little bit um, wary of a possible slowdown. Probably not for Springbank. Springbank's probably always going to be popular here, but um, yeah, no, really happy you've got a good supply there, and hopefully you keep enjoying them. I can afford them now, saving them until our time. Yeah, that's the other thing. We don't really know where the prices are going to go in the future. So yeah, I know I get that reasoning for sure. Greg, crazy those demijohns indeed. On paper, never been there. Seems like Infinity bottles, like Phil and Deepa brought some. I remember. Um, yeah, Phil and Deepa. I watched their unpacking video. Great channel there, Whiskey Mystery. They brought back some crazy bottles and some auction buys too. Some they made out like bandits. Kartik, the long road demijohn was stellar, as was the open day. Yeah, yeah, that long road demijohn. Again, that is probably the one regret for things I didn't bring back from Springbank. Even Gibson, it's impossible to try everything. I'm in Scotland and seriously suffer from FOMO. As you're aware, most Scottish people don't like whiskey. Yeah, it was interesting. And Eric Waite talked about this a bit on his Springbank school stream he did. Um, Even the people that work at Springbank, most of them don't actually drink whiskey. They drink something it's like wine or beer, I think is what they're talking about. And that's if they drink. So it's not actually necessarily the norm that everyone's drinking whiskey. And you're never gonna try everything. And yeah, FOMO is one of those things that you get a sense for, and you go, eh, yeah. Eventually, you have to find a way around it, as much as it tries to control you. And he says, "I'm gonna love that the Hazelburn Open. Yeah, that open release. I tried it. I'm very much looking forward to opening it." Gregoire, you need to travel with another friend who doesn't like whiskey. Make the sacrifice to get there with you, and then they'll buy two of those, and you'll offer the person maybe some branded cool clothes. Oh man, okay. Um, we've looked at for clothes for the channel. I guess we could do a t-shirt. Guys, let me know if you actually want whiskey on the West Coast, attire and all that. We were looking at hats, like flat brim hats, because I love my hats, and we've worked with some designs, pulling that together. But I don't really know if anyone actually would want any whiskey on the West Coast gear. So let me know if you guys actually want hats or shirts or stuff. That would be pretty cool actually to have someone to travel along with. I mean, Kyla basically did that for me on this trip too. She was a big help. She was oftentimes a designated driver on Islay, and I definitely loaded her suitcase with a lot of bottles, and she brought back one of those Hazelburn releases. So yeah, no, that's a good plan. Okay, so if I'm talking about the cage bottlings, I want to talk about something here to check before you purchase your cage bottling, especially if you're traveling. Because I was traveling and I got a little worried when I finally got my hands on my cage bottle and found this. Now, I'd never seen this before. What you're looking at there is the back of my Springbank 11-year-old fresh sherry bottle, and that is a bubble. That's a bubble in the glass. Um, and I touched it with my fingernail, and it actually started moving higher. I started expanding. Then the glass started flaking off, and I could see that it actually was concave, and it was actually taking chunks basically out of the glass. So it wasn't actually solid glass in there. So that meant the wall of the glass underneath that bubble, and there's a second one just above it there, above the UK tax sticker. Um, those bubbles I thought might not provide enough structure in the bottle to get it home this 7,000-kilometer journey back from Scotland to near Vancouver, British Columbia. I started to get nervous, and I figured I should go back and talk to the distillery. And so I did. I went back and I talked to the Springbank shop, and they agreed to go ahead and replace my my cage bottling of Springbank 11-year-old. However, the sad news is that they didn't actually have another 11-year-old. They could only offer to replace that cage bottling with one in the same price bracket and also was available on the shelf. And so I was a little bummed about that because I was really looking forward to this 11-year-old cask strength single cask fresh sherry Springbank. I was thinking maybe if I got a really heavily sherry Springbank 12 cask strength or a sample one at some point, I could do a great side by side. However, what I did get instead, and I'll remove this part here, is I did get another Springbank, so I was happy about that. The only Springbank proper that I brought home. And that is a similar Springbank 9-year-old fresh sherry cage bottling. It's actually bottled on the same date as the Hazelburn. It's bottled on April 20th, 2023. And you can see the color on that. I mean, I'm almost a little worried. I'm almost a little worried. It's either going to be immaculate, um, or it might be a little sulfuric. And I might have to let this one rest and air out a bit before I go ahead and crack into it. But what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and I'll arrange these a little bit differently. And maybe if you guys want me to go ahead and crack one of these Springbank cage bottlings. I've been waiting for a live stream or some sort of event to go ahead and actually open the cage bottlings here. So let me know in the comments if you'd like me to open up the Hazelburn 14-year-old cage bottling or the Springbank 9-year-old, both of them being fresh sherry. So let me know, and we'll turn our attention back to this Kilkerran private bottling for a moment too. Yeah, that sherry, that fresh sherry looks on the Hazelburn. It looks a little bit lighter on the sherry influence, even though it's got an extra 5 years. So that's interesting. So Hazelburn, Springbank. Next up to discuss while we're waiting for that to happen, I take another sip of this Kilkerran private bottling. Oh man, it's still full on with the citrus notes, coconut and vanilla, some like pie crust. Yeah, that's wow. Hmm. A touch of salinity too, like almost like the rim. It's a oh, like a shot of tequila. Take away the tequila part, and like you're looking at like the salt and the lime that you use as a chaser in the in the ill-advised days of my youth. Tequila shots. Ooh, and some funk now on the finish too. I am gonna have a good time getting to know that distillery private bottling for 2023. The Washback Bar. And I understand that this is a more recent addition to the Springbank Distillery. It is a bar you can go and visit just across from the distillery shop that has an incredible array of Springbank bottlings. And so here in the middle picture, you can see the open day releases, the Long Row and the Hazelburn, the 8-year-old and the 14-year-old Oloroso sherries. Tried both of those. After trying them, in my opinion, the Oloroso was a stunner. I really not Oloroso, the Hazelburn was a stunner. Really appreciated that one, but I deemed them both very worthy to come home with me. I was extremely ecstatic. In the background of that photo, too, you can see on the right there's the Springbank Open Day release, which I believe was a 24-year-old, and then a Kilkerran Open Day release, which actually was a triple distilled Kilkerran, which is a fascinating proposition. I would have gotten a glass of that, but I believe it was actually a bit more money. It was a bit more expensive, and so I didn't want to go in and splash out for that. Especially because on the left, you'll see my favorite pour of my visit to the Washback Bar, and that was a Springbank 1996 vintage 12-year-old Amontillado sherry cask strength bottling. I believe it was cask strength. It was bottled at 46% alcohol. Again, it was, I believe it was bottled in, I believe it was 2008 or 2009. It was 1996 vintage, and there was an incredible notes on that. The funk was very strong with that one, and opened up my eyes to Amontillado cask finishes. The first I'd had, and I started looking for anything Amontillado cask finished after trying that. That was only £10 a glass, which maybe I'm just too used to Canadian prices where they want to charge us $50 a glass for Octomore, any Octomore, not even a special one. So $50 Canadian, but £10 for a glass of a vintage, really at this point, an older bottling of Springbank. Yeah, no, that's very fair. That's extremely fair to charge that amount. Let's see here. Yeah, so really enjoyed my time at the Washback Bar. I also tried my last dram at the Washback Bar was a long row single cast 12-year-old from Oloroso Sherry, but it was just under 58% alcohol from 1996 as well, bottled in 2009. And it was great. I believe that one cost me maybe £12. What's really cool with the Washback Bar, you can see on the outside in that right hand picture, it's actually made from like the inside, the actual bar where you're set up. If you're having a glass at the bar itself, is actually an old recycled, repurposed distillery washback, kind of like the side there. You can see one side of it. So that was really cool. It's really nifty. You can see in the center picture, it's kind of circular shaped there at the bar. So that's they use the exterior of the washback to frame that in. Really cool, really slick design. Really enjoyed it there. Let's see here. We can move on here to the Cadenheads tasting. So the Cadenheads, if you're not familiar with Cadenheads, they're the independent bottler that is owned by Springbank. They were, I believe, it was back in the 1960s. I shouldn't throw out a date right now. I'll be wrong if I just throw out arbitrary dates. But they've been part of Springbank for quite some time, and they have warehouses on the site of Springbank where they are aging whiskey from multiple distilleries from around Scotland, which is really cool to see. So we went ahead and we met at the Springbank shop, just like our other Glengyle and Springbank tours, and they walked us over to actually a Springbank warehouse, and that was interesting because their Cadenheads warehouse is actually closed right now. It's dangerous to go inside the Cadenheads warehouse. Apparently, it's deemed somewhat structurally unsound right now. And so we couldn't actually do our warehouse tasting in there. So we instead did it at a Springbank warehouse, which I was not complaining about. It was a dream to be drinking whiskey inside a Springbank warehouse. Now it was a great tasting. We pulled from directly from 6 different casks that we sampled. We had Highland Parks, we had Fetter Cairns, um, we had a world whiskey. I can't remember the world whiskey right now, but it was really a fantastic time. Great group, great tour guide that took us through the tastings. Now, the casks that we tried, um, what we were told was in order to purchase any bottles of them, we had to go ahead and we had to go to the Cadenhead shop in order to pick them up. You had to take part in the warehouse tasting in order to be able to purchase them. You had to prove that you're in the tasting. So you had to provide a receipt or some sort of proof or evidence that you went ahead and actually took part in the tasting in order to purchase any of them. So that was really interesting. I hadn't heard that restriction anywhere else, like at Bunnahabhain, in order to go ahead and purchase the single cask bottlings that they use in the Warehouse 9 tasting. Anyone could walk in and purchase them off the shelf. So that was a little bit different, but it was appreciated. It meant that there was a little bit extra that you got for taking part in it. You had the ability to go ahead and pick those up. Now, I mentioned that we tried a Highland Park. I believe it was a really young Highland Park. It was about 6 years old. And our tour guide mentioned that, to their knowledge, they'd no longer be purchasing casks of Highland Park because Highland Park was no longer going to be selling Highland Park distillate to Cadenheads, um, which is interesting in light of the news from people like Gordon and MacPhail, who have announced that I'm sure you've probably heard if you're watching this, that they're no longer going to be purchasing or filling their own spirit in their own casks from various distilleries across Scotland. They're going to focus on Benromic and they're going to focus on the Cairn instead of focusing on um, independent bottlings from other distilleries. And perhaps maybe distilleries pulling back and saying, hey, we're going to stop selling spirit. We're going to stop letting you fill spirit. Maybe that's the reason why they stopped. Or maybe it's a cost. Maybe it's a cost thing, but it's more indications that there is interesting times ahead for independent bottlers around Scotland and the world. One thing I've noticed here after a flurry of comments there, guys, looks like we haven't had any comments in the last little bit. Just wanted to shout out if someone can just put something in the chat to test it to make sure it's still working. Last comment I have is from Greg at 12:29 my time here. So it's been about 15 minutes since a comment, which is a-okay if you guys are all just casually drinking along. But I just want to make sure everything's working properly here. Now, one of the things I really loved in regards to the Cadenheads shop is the glass they gave you. I'll pull it down here because a little bit different. It's not a typical like capita. You see lots of capitas handed out, and you see lots of Glencairns used. But this is the what the Cadenheads glass looked like. It's very different shape. I really appreciated this glass. Sometimes it's just nice to change things up and to try something different using a Glen instead of a Glencairn, but to use a different shaped glass. So I really appreciated that touch from the Cadenheads tasting. Great group of people. And yeah, I can't say enough. If you're in Campbelltown already, why not go ahead and sign up for the warehouse tasting? It's always a great time. All right, I've got a word here that the chat's a-okay, which is great. That's perfect. Just wanted to make sure everything was still running as usual. Now would be a great time, I think, to go ahead and move off the subject of Springbank, as awful as that might sound to some, and go ahead and talk about, let's say, the other distillery that really shouldn't be referred to in that way because it's making so much great whiskey. It's getting lots of notoriety. I think it's just lived a little bit in the shadow of Springbank in the last while, and I think it that those times are just about over. And what I'm talking about is Glen, Scotia. Now, unfortunately for me, I only had really a day and a chunk, maybe a day and a half in Campbelltown to go ahead and visit. And so I had to prioritize, and I prioritized visiting Springbank for a tour, the Cadenheads warehouse tasting, and the Glengyle tour, because it just the times didn't sync up right for me to get to a Glen Scotia tour. And we also wanted to explore the rest of the town. We want to explore some of the shops and everything else. So um, for our first trip to Campbelltown, it didn't work out to go on a tour or a tasting at Glen Scotia, but I did make sure to go ahead and visit the grounds at the distillery at Glen Scotia. So here in the left-hand picture, you'll see the whitewash side, the wall here, of the Glen Scotia distillery. Really cool looking distillery. I love that look. I love it when they're painted in that fashion. It just looks right. It evokes images of places like Lafroig or Lagavulin to me as well. So I really appreciate that whitewash look. As I was approaching the distillery and I was checking out the exterior, I found a door open on the side of the distillery. Me being a nosy little whiskey lover, I went ahead and I just took a peek inside. I didn't step inside. I didn't want to trespass. I didn't want to do anything untoward. I wasn't welcomed in. But I just stopped and I took a picture and I saw the mash tun there. And so that middle picture, there's a picture of the Glen Scotia mash tun. Looks very different than the mash tun at Springbank, the cast iron one. Very different look here. Now, um, I took that picture, I admired the inside, and then I moseyed on because it was getting very much closer to closing on that day, and I didn't want to keep anyone late, and I wanted to make sure I popped in. And as I was actually approaching the Distillers Center, Visitor Center, I ran into a familiar face, and that was the face of Ian MacArthur of Lagavulin fame, who, as mentioned in a prior video, is going to be retiring, I believe, this December. He's the one that took us through our warehouse tasting at Lagavulin. It was a fantastic time, quite the character and quite the legend in the whiskey industry. So what we know from him walking out, I saw he was walking out with a firm grasp on a bottle of Glen Scotia. So it seems evident to me that Ian MacArthur is a fan of Glen Scotia whiskey. So that was really cool. Said hi to him, and I popped inside the shop. And for sale inside the distillery shop, they had an impressive single cask 23-year-old Glen Scotia. That was definitely a temptation to bring home with me. They had the 11-year-old Campbelltown Malts Festival lightly peated white port cask, which is actually what I asked if I might be able to try. And they had the Victoriana in its new livery. I believe it might be the third batch of Victoriana. I have the second batch here on my shelves. And so I went ahead and I tried that Malts Festival release, and it was lovely. The sweetness from those white port casks, which I hadn't had white port casks with a whiskey like a white port cask finished whiskey before. The sweetness and the slight savory touch of the light peating, I think worked really well. I wasn't I didn't bring a bottle of it home with me, but I'm eagerly watching to see if it does come to Canada, and I'm looking at options for shipping it from the UK back to Canada as well. So yeah, definitely looking into options to get myself a bottle of that. It was very fairly priced too. I think it was about 55 pounds. So yeah, that's definitely a recommendation for me. Checking out that 11-year-old Campbeltown Malts white port cask lightly peated release. Um, Now, I want to talk about my number one tip for visiting Scotland here because it actually relates to a story that happened while I was at the Glen Scotia Distillery. And that is my number one tip for visiting Scotland is don't go empty handed. Make sure that when you're visiting, there's so much great hospitality from the people of Scotland, the people at the distilleries, the people taking care of you. It's nice to be able to give something back to them. And so what I did is I brought something where I was from, and I'd recommend you do the same. Maybe you've already done this before in the past yourself. So I went ahead and I brought a whiskey that's local to me. And so I brought a bottle. Let me just, sorry, I'll grab it out here. I brought a bottle of this. I brought a bottle of Shelter Point Smoke Point from Vancouver Island, Campbell River in Vancouver Island in British Columbia here. So it's a local distillery to me. And they're doing fantastic things. I've talked about them before. They've been bottled by the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. They're yeah, they now are playing more with local peat. They're actually smoking casks with peat. But this one here, this was batch two. So this was an ex Islay quarter cask single malt whiskey that was about 6.5 years old, I believe. I brought not this bottle, but a different bottle that was finished in Scotland with me. And I think it's a great thing to be able to reach out and say, "Hey, I really appreciate what you're doing for me here. You're such a great host. Thank you for the tour. Thank you for the sample pours of these whiskeys. I want to pour something for you." Um, and oftentimes, because they're working, understandably, they have to pour it into sample jars. But I most people I offered it to took me up on the offer, and they were very thankful for it. So I really loved doing that. It was one of my favorite things. Actually, there was at one point at one of the tastings we did, I asked the tour guide if he would like some, and he was very enthusiastic about it. And actually, he said that I could go ahead and pour it for others too if I liked. So I actually poured it for our entire tasting group, which was great because there was an individual actually went ahead and led a cheers to Canada. So that was cool. That was fantastic. So I can't recommend that highly enough. Bringing something from where you are to share with the rest of the people that come from all around the world to Scotland, fellow whiskey lovers. I've shared it with distillery managers, with bartenders, again tour guides, anyone who really were wanting a pour. I was happy to pour it for. So after trying the Malts Festival release at the Campbelltown at the Glen Scotia Visitor Center, I went ahead and I asked them if they wanted to try the Shelter Point. Poured off a few bottles for them, and they were very happy to receive that. And then afterwards, because it was basically closing, I said a quick goodbye, a thank you, and went on my way. Now I'll put this Shelter Point off to the side here for a moment. And as I was going on my way, I decided to go around the other side of the distillery, and I saw this lovely picture here, this view of the Glen Scotia barrels sitting out. I'm guessing those are all conditioning outside, and really just the works here at the Glen Scotia Distillery. Really, it's a great site. I'd love to be able to go ahead and explore it. Um, However, when I doubled back, I passed that open door where I found the mash tun again. And as I passed it, I saw two people standing there and I recognized one of them. And instantly I was like, oh, I know who that is. I know who that is, but I couldn't put a name to the face immediately, but I knew there was someone very important. And so I kept walking, but I slowed down and I slowed down. I had this sudden realization, oh man, that is the Glen Scotia distillery manager, Ian McAllister. And as soon as the light bulb went off, who exactly I had just seen, I turned around. And I saw him actually approaching me and walking towards a door alongside the building. And so I stopped and told him, I appreciate what you do with Glen Scotia. I'm a big fan of your distillate. And I said, hey, I've traveled from British Columbia, Canada, and I brought a bottle with me. I was wondering if you'd like a pour. Now, Many thanks to Ian for this. He really didn't have the time to spare. Again, this was at the end of the day. It was a little bit bold for me to go ahead and offer him this, but um, he said, "Yeah, you know what? Actually, come up to my office, and we'll go ahead and you can pour me a glass that I'll put it in a bottle aside, and then when I have time, I'll come back and try it. Thank you very much." So we went up to his office. I was a little stupefied. I was a little stunned by what I was seeing. It was just all around the office. It was bottles. It was cask samples. It was notes. It was definitely he was hard at work in that office and putting a lot of different things together. I was again a little bit in shock by this. I didn't really necessarily know what to say, how to really talk anymore. And I didn't really wanna ask him too many questions because I didn't want to impose. Maybe I would have asked a few more questions if I did this over again, but what, I would say is Ian was so kind as to say, "Hey, thank you so much for, pouring this for me. I don't want you to leave empty-handed. I want to give you something in return." And so I'm not saying this, I'm not recommending, bringing a bottle so that you get things from other people, but I'm just relating the kindness of someone that I met at Glen, Scotia. And so he rooted around his office and he asks me, "Do you like heavily peated whiskey?" I mean, do I? I don't know. Let me count the octomorphs down in the bottom corner there. Yes, I love heavily peated whiskey. I love it. And so he pulls out this bottle. I'll pull it out now. Pulls out this cask sample bottle here. And this bottle here, if I read it, I put some notes on the back. It has the number 2013, 172 HP. And I believe it says WSB. I think this is from 2013. And he told me it was 10 years old. So that would make sense. 2013 to 2023, 10 years old. I believe it's first fill ex bourbon cask sample of heavily peated Glen, Scotia. So actually, I'll pull these pictures down so you can see it a little bit better. Right there. That was the writing on the bottle here. So you see this is still extremely full because I haven't cracked it yet. Because again, I was waiting for the right time. And I think this will be the right time. I haven't seen any votes for Springbank cage bottlings yet. I'm just gonna duck into this Kilcairn private release one more time before I season my palate with some heavily peated whiskey. Yeah, same profile on that distillery visitors release from Kilcairn. It's yeah, that fantastic lemon meringue, coconut cream sort of pie sort of notes. I think that's the perfect way to describe it. Maybe it's a little bit burnt on top too with like a torch because I'm getting that peat lick at the end there. I'm gonna love getting to know that, and I'm very sad that it's only a 50 mil bottle because that should be bottled. That should be a full size bottling. That's really good. That's really good. Makes me excited for that Springbank one as well. So let's crack this heavily peated Glen Scotia. I'll use my Cadenheads warehouse tasting glass for this. Thank you so much to Ian for providing me with this. That was really an unexpected kindness, both his time and um, this the sample here of the whiskey. Just yeah, I can't say enough good things about how accommodating and how welcoming um, really everyone was on our trip to Scotland. Um, but Ian, especially a stranger, approaches him on the street, offers him whiskey some from halfway across the world, and says, "Yeah, come up to my office and here for the trouble, go ahead and take this with you." So yeah, thank you so much, Ian, and Slunge, if you ever watch this, guessing not, but you never know. Well, that's heavily peated, all right. It's a little early to be nosing this, but It's nosing like what I'd imagine like Ardbeg would without the tar sort of notes. Because again, it's very citrus forward. The peat is more like a campfire peat. Yeah. Someone just notified me. Kyla just notified me that we have a vote for the Hazelburn there on Cage Volumes. I believe my chat is broken on StreamYard here. It's not displaying any new comments, so I'm really sorry about that, guys. I might go ahead and get a phone going here so I can go ahead and catch up on comments. Do it in an old-fashioned way. But yeah, my chat absolutely stopped. I knew that was weird. I knew it was weird that all of a sudden there was nothing. Let's see here. All right, sorry guys. On the fly here. We'll make this work. We'll make this work. Trying to catch up to where I was. All right, yeah, I'm there. So Greg was talking about it'd be fun to wear whiskey on the West Coast in Paris. That would be fun. That'd be a little weird. I'd love to see a picture of that in front of me. Maybe the Sacre Coeur or Arc de Triomphe. I don't know. It'd be fun. Smeargel in Finland said you'd be a little bit worried about local accents in Scotland and the UK. Think about a trip to Scotland. I think people. There was so many people from around the world, especially a lot of Germans I ran into. I think you'd do fine. I think you'd manage and you'd have a lot of fun doing it. Let's see here. Yeah, I won't be able to catch up on all these comments here, guys. Sorry about that. I see Anthony talking about the tax situation, bringing bottles back to Canada. You're only allowed a certain amount of liters, 1.14 liters coming back to Canada. I think I came back with a little over 5 liters, and I believe the tax situation is around 200% tax coming back. Unless you land in Alberta, which is where I landed, and they just waved me through. Checking this nose. It's settled a bit now. At first, the ethanol was flying off of this cast sample, but citrus, some coastal salinity, definitely ex bourbon, vanillas and caramels there, so like toffees or butterscotch. That peat, it's not campfire peat. It's probably closer to like an earthier peat, like maybe like a campfire that's been doused with water. Really interesting. I never had heavily peated Glen Scotia before. I'm really sorry, guys. I gotta apologize about this StreamYard chat function stopping. I'd love to display some of these awesome comments, but sadly, they are not. They're not populating for me on StreamYard. That's really too bad. Um, let's see here. They have some old and rare releases, Greg, at the Washback Bar. I don't know anything from 1960s like those. I don't think like I saw anything like that special release set of like 30, 35, 40, 45, so on. But they do have some flights and some really interesting things. You can get, I believe, the 30-year-old Springbank 30-year-old. It's not like an old and rare release, but the modern 30-year-old Springbank release for about £50, which is a lot, but it's also 30-year-old Springbank. So keep that in mind. Greg chiming in, doesn't usually use Glencairns, but likes to collect them. Yeah, if you visit enough distilleries, you'll have a huge collection of Glencairns in no time. Stephen Gibson, like you saw the future there, Stephen. Did I meet Mr. McAllister? Oh, I met him all right. I met him, and it was a fantastic experience. Again, just the kindness to give me this. Yeah, Craig, very kind comment. I can't believe we're 2 hours in now. It's so interesting. I didn't see the time flow. I love that comment, Greg. Thank you so much for that. John, Just Whiskey, still here. The Glen Scotia story is the biggest bomb. Reminds me of myself. Yeah, it's just it made sense to me to bring a bottle along to share the kindness, to say thank you, and Scotland and the people just said thank you back. So yeah, I gotta take a sip of this now. Really, really loving this nose. Oh wow, that is extremely heavily peated. Much more heavily peated than the nose let on. Really getting that alcohol punch too. Um, the peppering, but on the resolve right now, earthy, leathery tones. Not necessarily towards tobacco, but almost like cigar. Nice like resolve of a cigar. And some tropical tones on the nose here now too. Almost like a mango, but very naked. And this, I mean, this might be first fill bourbon. It said 1SB on the front. So I would interpret that as first fill bourbon, but that could have been something else. It just feels very naked. Maybe it's the 10 years as opposed to longer, but definitely bourbon influence. That is a peat bomb. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is something, and you might be able to see the legs on this here. Really oily, really clinging to the glass. Maybe dropping halfway at this point. Um, that's going to take a long time for me to really get to know it. Super earthy peat on that though. This is my first look at a heavily peated Glen Scotia. Um, Sweetness, but it's really leaning in on those savory notes from that peat. Savory, ashy, smoky, heavier tones. Yeah, that's something. Check back in on the comments as I can on this cell phone here. We're making it work, guys. Making it work. So I vote for the Springbank, but it's okay if it's the other two. That was from Greg. Tim Locks. Oh, that's a name I recognize. Greetings from Northern California. Glen Scotia has become a favorite because there's no anxiety about whether you'll ever score another bottle. The previous Campbeltown Festival bottles are good and still around. Yeah, well, again, I've definitely got a vote for that white port, lightly peated release from Glen Scotia. That was delicious. I would like to get a bottle of that from my travels. I'd also like to get, if you caught in some of the Isla videos before, the Bunnahabhain Canasta Fegil release from this year. That was really good. And I do want to get a bottle of that at some point. When you're talking about Glen Scotia bottles being relatively available, I have the 15 on my shelf. I have the Victoriana. I'm seeing the 15 less and less. I didn't actually see the 15 at the distillery shop, but the Victoriana, the new livery, the new labels, all that on it, that was around. Well, here, I really do love my Victoriana. Like others, I don't like how tall the bottle is, but the whiskey inside the bottle is top notch. Really enjoy it. I am definitely a fan of Glen Scotia, no doubt about it. Like I said, they tend to kind of live in the shadow of Springbank right now, but that's not for long. They're going to be front and center, if not already soon. But let's enjoy it while it lasts before everyone else catches on. Checking comments again. A little harder to keep track of votes now that I have to do it on the phone. Wraith, have to head off, but enjoyed the tour of Campbeltown so far. Thank you for joining, Wraith. Really appreciate that. Know we're going a little long. We'll try to wrap it up in the next little bit here. Greg, I was poured this kind of dram blind. In fact, it was an 8-year-old heavily peated Glen Scotia, and I mistaked it with Kilkerran heavily peated, so I didn't win the bottle. Too bad. I could see that. There's some sort of maybe it's the Campbeltown funk element of it, because there definitely seems to be some more like overripe fruits on the palate I was picking up. I was trying to pick through. Very different. Not what I would expect at all for a heavily peated Glen Scotia. Really interesting. I could definitely see the comparison with the Kilkerran heavily peated. I just found from my experience with Kilkerran heavily peated, I just found it very heavy on the fruits and the fruit funk. So yeah, 50 pounds is let's see here, Greg. Couple tough questions for you from Whiskey and Wine Trails. 3 days in Campbeltown or 3 days on Islay? Ooh, and then second one, Victoria Whiskey Festival in January. Yay or nay? Okay, so I'm gonna cover the Victoria Whiskey Festival first for their whiskey and wine trails. It's a fantastic festival from what I can tell. Going on over in Victoria. It is hosted by the Strath, I believe, and Adam Bradshaw at the Drama Association does a great job. There's always great master classes from Gordon MacPhail. I believe Richard Urquhart was there last year himself. So the Urquhart family representing. Um, I've always looked at that and longed to go. I've really wanted to go. I've never been to the Victoria Whiskey Festival, believe it or not. This year, I think we're going to make it happen. I'm planning to be at the Victoria Whiskey Festival. I know Leanne from Scotch on the Bayou. She went last year, I believe, and she loved it. She raved about it, and I do know that she's planning to go to this year's Victoria Whiskey Festival as well. So, uninformed person who's never been to it, I will say I'm going to suggest going to the Victoria Whiskey Festival. It's for a good cause too. I believe they're raising money for charity with it. So yeah, highly recommend that. As someone who's never been, highly recommending something I've never gone to. Interesting, but I'm planning to go. So if that tells you anything, I'm excited for it. Now, 3 days Campbeltown, 3 days Islay. I think it all depends on if you've ever gone before. I'm guessing you're not since you're asking. You haven't since you're asking the question, and I'd suggest probably Islay just for the experience, just because there's so much variety. Like you have the beaches, you have um, a very unique experience. You're on the island. I love going on the ferry. You have all these different distilleries at your fingertips. You could actually hit up quite a few if you're visiting or popping in. I would suggest the Brooklady tour or warehouse tasting. You have such a breadth of whiskey there as well. You can get up to Bunnahabhain. Um, just even like if you only spent 1 day alone doing the South Kildalton coast and doing Ardbeg, Lagavulin, and Lafroig, just walking that path, that's 1 day. Your second day, you can hit up two more distilleries, say Killoman and Brooklady. They're really close to each other on the other side of the island. Third day, you hit up Bunnahabhain, maybe Kalila, or you do Bowmore and then Bunnahabhain like I did in a day. Um, I think it's a no-brainer, unfortunately. You go ahead and you head to Islay if you had to do 3 days in either one. But that's just me. You guys can answer that in the comments too. Let Whiskey and Wine Trails know what you would suggest they do in that case. Ooh, some pepper. Some pepper on that. I gotta take this a little bit slower. Kyla's voting for Isla too, if anyone's wondering. Yeah, she's saying Isla all day. So there's the vote from Kyla. Oh, there's like an effervescence underneath the peat, like some really bright tropicals. This cast strength Glen Scotia heavily peated is popping off. The nose is just getting better. Yeah, I'm in love with this nose right now. I'd love to compare this to some other heavily peated like Kilkerran in due time. In due time. Mm. Oh, that's delicious. Mm. I think I'm in love with the finish more than the palate. The palate's a little hot. I definitely need to add some water to this. Um, I think my water dropper's in the other room. But um, once you get past the heat, I'd say almost like a chili oil heat at the front. You're starting to get into some savory and sweet dessert tones, and into the finish. The finish is really nice, really nice. Again, almost like you've taken a drag off of a cigar. You've exhaled, and now you're just letting that coat your mouth. Ah, Kyla coming up big with the assist. Let's add some water to this. We'll check in with the comments a bit more as we limp along with no help from String Nerd on the comments. So I believe this would be about 1 ml of water with the amount of drops I put in there. Don't want to go too fast with water, but also we got to bring this to a close. Everyone's got their Saturdays to enjoy, or I guess this is their Saturday nights for people like Gregoire and Steven. Let that sit. I think that's going to do well with some water. Spiridel, I'd rather pay £50 for 30-year-old whiskey than $25 Canadian for Lagavulin 16 at bars, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, Lagavulin 16 is a ridiculous price for a pour in a restaurant, and at about $175, I believe, even before tax in BC. I can't justify buying Lagavulin 16 anymore, which is really sad because it's a great bottle. It's a good bottle. I don't know why it had to go that way. Let's see here. Yeah, yeah. Cost my local shop $160 Canadian for Lagavulin 16. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Uh, Anthony, Anthony Silent. My missus family came from Ontario, but we live in the UK. When they visit the UK, they are always surprised by our booze-ridden country. That's one way to describe it, I guess. Booze-ridden, or maybe just flowing with like the land of milk and honey, but with whiskey. Who knows? What's the tax situation? We covered that a little bit. Around 6 years ago, I was asked. Gregoire is saying around 6 years ago, I was asked in Whiskey Live Paris, Collector's Corner, Paper Dram, €40 for 1.5 centiliter of a Springbank 1966 local barley, and I shared it with one of my best friends. Total stunner. Local barley, 1966. I wonder, do you know what the age was on that 1966 local barley? That's of another era. That's a very fair price to pay. Wow. Yeah, no, I'm sure that's one of those drams you'll never forget there, Gregoire. Partic, that Buna Canasta should be coming to Alberta soon. It might be an opportunity to grab it. That's what I'm waiting for. I've been looking at picking it up from places like Royal Mal Whiskies, one of the few shops that ships to Canada. I've been hoping that it'll come to Alberta. If not, maybe the fall spirits release in British Columbia. If it doesn't, I might be out of luck because Royal Mal Whiskies is now sold out of it. I waited too long. I do that a lot with whiskey. I wait and I wait and I miss. That's okay. There's always another bottle around the corner. Catching up here. Gregoire, best drams have to be shared with people who can enjoy them. Absolutely. Whiskey has to be shared. As I was talking about with Joel there earlier, I'll have to get back together with him and share some more whiskey. In response, Smeardale is voting for that Springbank cage bottling. I think we're going to be going Springbank with opening. We'll leave Kyla's bottle alone. She can have her bottle intact. I'll open my Springbank 9-year-old as we're coming to a close. Whiskey and Wine Trails, thanks, Matt. I'm leaning towards Islay next year, and we'll hit Victoria this coming January or the following year, cash dependent. Hey, I hope to see you there. I really do. When tickets are released, I believe they're released in November or December. Yeah, I hope to get some myself, and then I hope to meet lots of lovely people there, like Leanne and like yourself, Whiskey and Wine Trails. Yeah, should be a fun time. Should be a fun time. Let's see here. More vanilla, more tamed that peat quite a bit on the nose, the water on this Glen Scotia. Yeah. While we are discussing this here and sipping through this, catching up with comments, we should start talking about the upcoming distilleries, the planned 4th and 5th distilleries for Campbeltown, just to get this back on track. And soon to be expanding Campbeltown region, we have from a gentleman who is no stranger to the independent bottling scene. We have the Dalriata Distillery. Now, it's named for an ancient Celtic kingdom that once stretched from parts of Ireland to the Kintyre Peninsula, Islay, really that corner of Scotland. And the distillery plans to set up in Campbeltown. And I'll pull out the independent bottling, one of the bottles here from the independent bottler that's behind this. So Dalriata is being set up by none other than Ian Croucher of North Star Spirits. Which is great because I love North Star Spirits. I love what Ian's done with that company. This is a 13-year-old secret Highland for North Star Spirits. It's bottled at 42.9% alcohol. I'm not sure about chill filtration on this, but I do know that it is the Secret Highland. It's actually a Ruid Moor. It's peated Glen turret. And it's fantastic. I really enjoyed this, as you can tell by the fill level on this bottle. I've been drinking through this, and I've used it to compare some SMWS bottlings, recent SMWS bottlings of um, peated Glen turret Ruid Moor. Really great bottle. So Ian Croucher is behind it, as well as David Stirk, who's an author. He wrote the Campbeltown book I referenced earlier, as well as a recent book on the independent bottlers that I tried to pick up while I was in Scotland, but I was informed I had to be part of the crowdfunding campaign for it. So I was sad about that. But Dalriada, I'm really excited about it. They plan to set up next to North Star Spirits' sister branch, South Star Spirits. They have a bottling hall there that they're going to attach themselves to. They plan to use locally sourced barley, as well as produce about approximately 850,000 liters per year. So that's nothing to sneeze at. That's more than Campbelltown. Not Campbelltown, sorry. That's more than Springbank. That's more than Glengyle. So that's actually a pretty sizable distillery. It's going to be situated on the banks of Campbeltown Loch. That's really exciting news. I think that distillery is in good hands. They should have a lot of capital behind them. They have a business that is moving whiskey already for them. So if they want to lay down stocks and let it sit until it's ready, they have other means of raising capital. I think I'm really excited about Dalriada. I'm really excited about that distillery. So moving on from that, we can talk about another distillery that there's plans to be setting up in Campbelltown, and that is the Machrihanish Distillery. I believe there's a Machrihanish golf course nearby. Machrihanish Distillery is R&B Distillers, which is Raasay in the Borders. So if you're familiar with Isle of Raasay single malt whiskey, that's the same people that brought you that distillery, which is really making a lot of noise these days. I've had the first inaugural batch of Raasay, and I'm waiting to see some more bottles come my way. And I'm definitely excited about what they're doing with Chinkabin oak casks, as well as others. So they're the company behind this one. Their plans to be the first legal farm distillery in Campbelltown region in 180 years after purchasing the Dury farm. Now they hope to be the first farm to bottle single malt in the region, and they plan to use their own locally grown barley off the farm and to be net zero emissions, which is that's an admirable thing to plan to do. Output for this is about half of what Dalriada would be. They're planning to be 400,000 liters per year, which is a bit more achievable with local barley. I don't think they'd want to plan to be as big as Dalriada. That would be a bit too much. And they're going to be located near the airport. So those are some of the bare bones details on some potential future Campbelltown distilleries, the fourth and potential fifth. I'm really excited about that. We need this region to expand so that we can continue to have some lovely Campbelltown whiskeys that we can actually get our hands on. Catching up on these right now. The comments. Let's see. It's 10:15 over in Paris, Greg says. So it's getting pretty late. In Finland, it's almost midnight. Oh, goodness, guys. You are hanging in for the long shot here. Thank you so much for being here. Stephen Gibson with a shout out to a bar I really enjoyed, the Ensign Ewart, on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. Does local barley and Longroad 21 at cost per dram right now. Yeah, they always have their bottle that they're doing at cost, which is great. It's a great initiative. When I was there, it was the Glen Scotia 23-year-old single cask. So I really love that. You wouldn't expect it with a location so close to Edinburgh Castle. You'd think it's almost like a tourist trap, but you go in there and it's a right proper whiskey bar. I really enjoyed it. They're doing great things there. I enjoyed my time there. One of my favorite bar visits, and they had some good food too. Their sandwich was really good, surprisingly. Yeah. Yeah, this nose is tamed down with time in the water on this Glen Scotia heavily peated. Yeah, that's lovely. It's lovely stuff. Greg's whiskey guide. I would love to be a little mouse and make it to a cast strength fat of Lagavulin 16-year-old, a cast strength, still unfiltered and uncolored. Yeah, wouldn't we all, Greg? Wouldn't we all? Now, I do have a sample from our Lagavulin warehouse tasting where we do have 16-year-old cask strength Lagavulin from a sherry cask. So that's about as close as I'm probably going to get to the 16-year-old unchill filtered natural color, all that. Ian MacArthur told us it was a cask of the 16-year-old. He said this is the 16-year-old at full strength. I don't. I mean, it's so hard to say that because the 16-year-old is a vatting of so many casks. But if Ian MacArthur's telling me that, I'm not going to contradict him. So I have a sample that I'll try to do with some Lagavulin content in the future. It was immaculate. Not my favorite whiskey of the tasting though, but close. Hmm. Stephen Gibson tried an Armagnac 56-year-old from Decanted Drinks. That's my oldest that you've tried. Armagnac is such a great value, guys. If you're not on the Armagnac or cognac train, cognac's a bit more expensive, but Armagnac can be had for a song. And oftentimes, if you really enjoy that really sherried profile for a aged spirit, give Armagnac a try. There's a lot of value there. There is even believe oh goodness me, I believe it's a 90-year-old cognac that was bottled by an independent bottler that came to Canada, distilled in 1928, and it was placed into some glass demijohns at the end of its time. But I believe it was selling for about $700 Canadian for 90-year-old spirit from before the Great Depression. Um, Imagine what a 90-year-old Macallan would cost. Or maybe don't. That's a terrifying thought after seeing the prices on the Macallan Reach, for instance. Yeah, lots of value in Armagnacs, especially if you're looking for age statement or birthday bottling. Let's see here. Smear gel. I'd love to try Springbank 10PX and the Springbank local barley bottles, but both are crazy expensive. Always. One German store had 50% off for local barley bottles, still left at 800 euros. Yeah, no, I'm not buying that at 800 euros. That's not happening. I'm walking away. Um, Greg said it hasn't tried anything North Star, but have been sent 13 samples by some cool guy in the UK. Oh, that's a great thing. Yet to try them, but bottled a few years ago, so I'll never be able to get to buy them. Check auctions. I've seen even like North Star Sirius, the 31-year-old blended malt that is either mostly or entirely Klein Leash. I've seen that at auction for really good prices. It's 1988 distillate, and I loved that bottle. I've seen that at auction for I think under 120, 110 pounds. Yeah. So then again, I guess you have to have access to the UK auctions. I don't. Perhaps you do, but Brexit might have complicated that for you. The other thing I want to talk about is some places we ate real quickly here. I really enjoyed the Ardshiel Hotel. They had lovely food, and their bar selection was great. They had, again, North Star Spirits, an 8-year-old Campbeltown blended malt that was bottled just for the Ardshiel Hotel. So highly recommend them if you're in Campbelltown. Go check them out. Also ate at the Harborview Grill, which is attached to the hotel and just around the corner from the Black Sheep pub. Yeah, great food, great view. Always enjoyed our pours there. And actually, I think we might have had mixed drinks that night. Honestly, I took a break from the whiskey, as sacrilegious as that might sound. Yeah, no, Campbelltown trip was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it to anyone. If you were making your way to Islay, um, it's a great little tack on to that trip. 2 days was probably a little too short. 3 days would probably be perfect because then you can explore some of the area around there as well. But I think, yeah, I think if I go back and I get to Islay, I'm gonna make sure I have time to go back to Campbelltown because I got to go back to Springbank. Got to get back to Springbank. We got to crack one of these cage bottlings. I think we're decided on the Springbank here. And as I check up on these comments, 16-year-old Blair Ethel Stephen Gibson is suggesting from North Star. They're knocking it out of the park along with Adelphi. Yeah, especially if you like sherried whiskeys. They both have some great sherry cask, it seems, these days. Um, yeah, the world whiskey capital, Campbelltown, that reputation, you can see it. You can see it in the buildings. You can see it with just how many distilleries are littered all around. Um, Greg, Armagnac, of course. Cadenhead also some bottles, some of the great scores from Whiskey Fun. Surge, yes. Surge and Angus at Whiskey Fun. They're doing some great stuff. Got some good ones if you make it there. I missed the details in local barley earlier. Check the chat maybe afterwards. Yeah, sorry, I'm struggling with the chat here, guys. We're gonna have to wrap this up because of the technical issues here. Well, we got to open up this Springbank cage bottling first. I don't want to cheat you guys on that. So let's get to that. Okay. Move this out of the way. I'm still a bit stunned by that Kilkerran private distillery visitors bottling. That was unexpected. How different it was from the official bottling 12-year-old. All right, here we go with the uncorking. Trusty Gordon McPhail. Capita. Glug, glug, glug. I'm always nervous with glassware on the table. The mic in the way in the middle makes it a little awkward. All right. So Springbank, 9-year-old, fresh sherry, cage bottling. It is 59.1%. It was distilled on the 14th of May, 2013. Bottled, as I mentioned, April 20th, 2023. Hope the weather's good where you guys are right now. I'm starting to feel the heat a bit here. We're constantly over 30 degrees here in British Columbia. And we're just surrounded by forest fires right now in every direction, it seems. I believe there's 5 burning within like a 50 or 60 kilometer radius of where I am right now. And the skies are filled with smoke, which is unpleasant. Right now, it's probably closer to 25 degrees outside. Oh, wow. That is spicy, fruity funk already. Rich, leathery notes. Fruit leather, like the Del Monte, like fruit leathers you get in lunches. Definitely some like jammy fruits, like stewed raisins. Heavy on the funk. Gotta let that breathe just a little bit. Take a sip of water, cleanse the palate. Thanks for sticking with me so long here, guys. Coming up on or just past 2.5 hours. We're gonna have to wrap this one up. Let's see here. Catching up on these. You order whiskey online from outside Canada, say UK or EU. Do you need to pay import taxes when the package arrives to Canada? Yes, you do. If you order it into BC or Ontario, it's nearly impossible to actually get it. It has to be imported by the government liquor board. And I saw the price on importing a bottle to Ontario recently, like a $60 bottle, and it was about $180 in taxes you pay on that. So triple the price. So that's a bit much. Anthony's off now. He's up at 4 a.m. tomorrow. Okay, good luck with that. Get some rest, and good luck tomorrow. I hope you got enough rest. Maybe some coffee will help. Stephen Gibson, Matt, if Royal Mile whiskey is shipped to Canada, I would highly recommend you try Rare Find Bruichladdich 16-year-old single cask, 58.8%. I know your preferences. You will love it. You're speaking my love language there, Stephen. Bruichladdich, excellent Bruichladdich. Age stated, mid-teens. Yes. I will be Googling as soon as this stream is over. Some of the alcohol is blown off the top of this Springbank cage bottle. Some lovely earthy, verging on like nutty tones too. More like milk chocolate, like hazelnut, so like a hazelnut. It's like a hazelnut, like Ritter Sport bar from my days in Germany, and it's just surround. Maybe it's a fruit and nut bar actually, with all these dark fruits in here, surrounded by that sherry funk. Might be more sherry funk than spring, like Campbeltown funk right now. Those who are sulfur sensitive, I think, would want to steer clear of some of these fresh sherry cage bottlings because you really are rolling the dice. I am not sulfur sensitive, so I'm not. I can pick it up in things that are really overly sulfured, but I don't think this is it. Let's see here. Smirgel says he doesn't import whiskeys back into Finland from the UK because of import taxes, and most of the online stores don't ship to Finland. Yeah, that's the same for Canada. Again, Royal Mail whiskeys is like the exception, so maybe they're the exception for Finland as well. But they only ship to Alberta, so I actually have to have a friend order for me to their address in Alberta, work with the government brokers there to bring it in. I believe it's about $12 a bottle you have to pay in Alberta instead of 300%. And then I can pick it up from them. But it's quite the process. Okay, some information here from Gregoire on Armagnac. He said it could be mistaken with a bottle of 50-year-old Armagnac, mind you, but Armagnac is allowed to be loaded with E158 caramel colorant, raw sugar, and wood essence. Interesting. Unfortunately, like cognac. That is, that is unfortunate. I was not aware of that. But you would be very much in the know with the French distilled spirits. I appreciate that bit of information. Most of my Armagnac experience is with bottlings from independent bottlers like DeRose, and others. So hopefully they're not using the same practices, but I'm also not sure at what point in the process that they're adding those things, if it's just before bottling or if it's somewhere else in the process. All right, enough of the nosing of this Springbank cage bottling, this 9-year-old fresh sherry. First pour, fresh crack. I'm gonna take a sip because this nose is very inviting. Timothy Newton's asking for the cage bottle stats. This was again distilled May 14th, 2013. Is bottled April 20th, 2023. See if that's showing up. Oh boy. There we go. Finally focuses. It's a 9-year-old. It's at 59.1%. No word on type of sherry. They don't give you that information. But fresh sherry, which would mean first fill sherry, as far as I understand. Mm. First thing on the palate was actually Coke bottles, candies, which is very similar to what I got off of both the heavily sherried Springbank 15s and the Springbank 10 PX at 55%. Definitely heavy Coke bottle and then into some fruit. And then the pepper kicked in. Um, More like cracked black pepper on the outside of my tongue. I'm guessing that's some of the heat. Definitely a chewy whiskey there, Timothy. Definitely chewy. A lot of funk on the back end. The finish is still funky for me right now. Um, but I think that's more that sherry funk. So again, sulfur wise, um, it would be a risk for someone who's sulfur sensitive. This is like it doesn't have some of the it doesn't have as much oak to it as the 15 does, in my opinion. 15's much more rounded, much more soft on the edges. Someone's asking about how it compares to the 15 Cartique. It's not as well rounded. It's not as easy drinking. Obviously, at cast strength as the 15, so it's hard to compare. But I think it's younger, drinks younger for sure, drinks hotter. But it has a lot of those same sort of flavor notes as those heavily sherried 15s that we've been seeing as of recent. That Coke bottle, those sort of leathery notes, the sherry funk, and the fruiting, like fruit leather, prunes, dates, some like fig spread. Definitely going to add some water to this. As after about 2 or 3 seconds of just like sherry goodness, the heat definitely kicks in there. So again, one of these water droppers, this was a little more full, is just about 1 mil, I believe, of water. Give that a gentle roll around the glass. Settle. Come back to see if water's changed it up a bit. But yeah, that is chewy. That is delectable sherry goodness that I'm gonna enjoy. I like all the Springbank profiles. I don't discriminate. I do have an increased appreciation of ex bourbon just because you get to see so much more of that distillate signature, and it's just it's a lot more refined, I'd say. But these sherry casts are a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun. Um, and I should clarify because Greg's mentioning here you can bear sulfur at an extent. The limit for me is that rotten eggs note that can occur. So no rotten eggs on this, which is why I'm still enjoying it. There was a recent Octomore release. I think it was 13.3 or 2. If you check my Octomore flight, peated flight core range rundown, I mentioned the sulfur note there, and that was straight away rotten eggs note on one of them. So for that right there, I tapped out on that whiskey. It wasn't one that I would like to own. It did blow off that whiskey if I remember correctly, but yeah, that rotten eggs note, that's where I pull the plug and say no, that's overly sulfured. Catching up here. Seeing the 18-year-old full Sauternes new bottling that's out in the UK. I have not seen the new Bruichladdich 18-year-old full Sauternes. No. That is intriguing, Gregoire. I've been aware that there's going to be a new official bottling 18-year-old from Bruichladdich. I've heard rumors about that for the last 6 months. I'm waiting to see if that materializes soon. Let's see here. Gregoire, you're safe with DeRose as far as I know. I'm now asking this to every brand when I go at a show about additives and filtration. Yeah, no, it's smart not to assume things when it comes to that. Smergella, I guess I'm not sulfur sensitive. I can really tell when I can't really tell when it's there or not. Hey, that means you can just enjoy more whiskeys. When you are sulfur sensitive, that starts limiting you, right? So I think that's just a blessing, not a curse. I try to make sure people know that I'm not particularly sulfur sensitive because those that are will pick up on that quite quickly, and it might ruin their experience. Whereas for me, it won't. Water's helped the nose already. It's still quite sweet, but more earthy, rich, and savory tones here. Almost like a touch meaty now, actually. Like a teriyaki note in there too, like teriyaki beef jerky. Wow. Mm, mhm. Water is really toned down that heat. The peppering is now more pleasant. It's actually an addition instead of covering up and taking away from the rest of the palate. That is delicious. That is wonderful stuff. And it is profiling towards the same sort of likes those heavily peated 15-year-olds, just with more youth, less oak influence, but still all the sherry. It must have been a very wet sherry cask. That was very, maybe it was a stroke of luck not to get the 11-year-old. I had heard from a person at the Cadenheads warehouse tasting that it had a bit of sulfur to it. He made sure that I was aware of that when I purchased it. Never got to taste it because of that glass bubbling problem. Maybe it was a stroke of good luck that I wound up with the 9-year-old instead of the 11, because this is funky sherry delight. I'm really excited about this, guys. I'm jacked. Yeah, this is good stuff. Well, with that, guys, I should catch up on the comments and we should say some goodbyes and let us all enjoy the rest of our weekend. Special mention from Stephen Gibson here on the Long Row 11-year-old Tawny Port Cask. Um, yeah, I had that Tawny Port Cask and it was really delectable. I find those port casks can go so much into those chocolate tones. So yeah, if I could find a bottle of that, I would pick it up. But you know how it is with Springbank these days, guys. Um, oh, Smirchel, are you a chemist? Says I do use sulfuric acid at my work, but yeah, interesting. And Greg here, Whiskey on the West Coast is a TWE exclusive 2004 vintage release in the Cask Evolution Exploration Series, bottled at 61.8% and currently sold out, but just checked out. And that's in regards to that Brook-Laddie 18-year-old Sauternes. Interesting. I'm sure that 18-year-old Brook-Laddie is probably better than the Ardbeg 13-year-old Sauternes cast that's being released. But maybe I shouldn't besmirch something I haven't tried yet. I'm just a little bit wary of anything Ardbeg these days. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this live stream. We have gone very long, but I think it was well worth it. It's been a lot of fun. Sorry about the chat issues halfway through. My apologies, but I hope I got to most everyone's comments. This has been fun. You can let me know in the comments if you want certain topics in the future. Again, let me know what times work best for you. And yeah, it has been a great time. I hope this has been helpful for anyone who might plan a trip to Campbeltown in the future. And if you have any further questions, just follow up in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them as best I can for tips on visiting Campbeltown, Springbank, Kilkerran, Cadenheads, or Glen, Scotia. Thank you once again to Ian McAllister for this lovely, heavily peated Glen, Scotia he gave me. Really an unexpected kindness that I really appreciate. And thank you all for spending and sharing your Saturday with me. You can go ahead, if you haven't already, somehow you wound up here and you're not a subscriber, if you can go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment down below to let me know. And until next time, guys, I'm going to lift up this Springbank cage bottling. And thank you all for joining me. I hope to see you again from the West Coast. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday night or day. Sanja. Mhm.